on 1080 The Fan.
And a fine good morning to you all. Yes, it is 6:02 in the Rose City. No, not Dirt and Sprague. It's just me, Swag, holding the fort down on a Friday. But glad you are along with us for this best of edition. We'll have the, it'll be like the Zoo Cam today for our YouTube listeners. Welcome, YouTube. Those of you on the stream, 99.5 HD2. And, of course, on 1080 The Fan. Appreciate you being along with us. It's summertime. The guys are taking a day here to recharge the batteries, as it were, taking care of family time, which is always good. So, fortunately, we have had many, many, many great interviews and guests over the last, 3 or 4 weeks. You'll get a fair amount of Blazers. Not only did they not fare well in the draft lottery, we'll talk to Bill Oram about that. Bobby Marks came on once it was announced the team is actually up for sale and will be auctioned off here in the next, 12 to 18 months, however long it takes them to get there. Plus, we'll hear from Gary Parrish and Tyler Metcalf on who the Blazers could prospectively draft if they hold on to that 11th pick. It's getting ready 100 days out, less than 100 days from the start of the football season, both college and NFL. Mike Silver was kind enough to drop by, told a great story about being in the Jags war room during the NFL draft. Josh Pate from the 50-yard line at West Virginia Mountaineer Stadium. Some of his thoughts on where college football is headed, trying to sort itself out yet again. And some other fun tidbits. And if you missed it the other day, Joe Freeman was here. It is the start of the NCAA baseball regional tournament action in both Corvallis and Eugene today. We'll get his thoughts on the probability both the Ducks and Beavers could get to Omaha. But the week started with an unusual story. And so you know who it came from. It was Sprague talking about the holiday weekend journey for some hot yoga.
We like to go try different things as a couple. So, like, one of the things we've done before is yoga. We'll just choose a random yoga studio. So I thought, what if we did hot yoga?
Hot yoga together.
And that was difficult. That was a workout.
Now, what temp are we talking with hot yoga?
It was 97 degrees.
Whoa, that's steamy.
It was 97 degrees, and I would say in the studio, which was in your neighborhood in Selwood,
Ooh.
It was probably a 25 to 30 person class.
Ooh, that's hot. That's a lot of sweat.
And I'm not talking about a big old studio here.
That's a lot of people.
And they had carpet, which made it smell weird.
That's not ideal.
I didn't think so either.
I feel like you want to go hardwood floor with
so you can mop it
with the mats, and then you clean the floor. It's a lot easier to clean.
Yeah, they didn't do that. Anyways, it was a good class. It was hot. It was challenging. Nice little start to our day.
Being that hot amongst a lot of other people in a small amount of space is a little uncomfortable for me. I don't know if I could do that.
I'll one up you. It was one of these, like, everybody there was a yogi.
Yeah.
And I like yoga. I think it's very productive.
Everybody's into it.
I did not properly prepare. One, I forgot my water bottle.
Uh-oh.
That was stupid.
Uh-oh.
Two, I walk in, I have my T-shirt and shorts on, and every dude in there is wearing basically a Speedo with nothing else. I wish I was exaggerating. I'm not. I'm not in any way. I was the only guy to wear a T-shirt.
I didn't know that was a thing. That's what people wear in hot yoga? They just rock a Speedo?
Ladies coming in with sports bras and shorts. Dudes coming in just basically Speedos.
Okay. Interesting move.
Which, you know what? They ended up being right. My shirt was soaking wet.
It's hot. You could take the shirt off, though. You could just go basketball shorts.
The wife said, "Why didn't you take your shirt off?" I was like, I don't know. I'm too into it. I didn't want to.
Uncomfortable right now.
Well, it's like when your shirt is already soaking wet.
Yeah,
there's no point.
No point. You're just defeating the purpose.
Because then I'm gonna put a wet shirt on.
Yeah, I feel like that's the same thing as, and I know there is some benefit to it, so the biking community doesn't have to get pissed at me but like the average biker out there that doesn't go on long distance biking and they wear the all spandex outfit.
Oh yeah,
like that's the equivalent of that for me. Like you're just trying to dress up for the part. It's like the guy who wears the white belt and pants when it's 95 degrees to play golf. Like,
yeah,
you're not on the PGA Tour. Just wear some shorts, buddy. You're going to be okay. Shorts and a polo. You're fine.
Would it be funny to find the bikers in Portland that you see that pass by and they're in like what looks like a Tour de France uniform?
I want to know how far you're going on that bike ride. Well, if that's a sub 5 mile bike ride, you put some clothes on.
Well, also
you look like an idiot.
How often do you bike and they're like,
Yeah, twice a month. Right.
Why do you have that outfit?
You got the long helmet that like extends back like a pointer. You look like a villain in a superhero
For the
movie.
wind.
Yeah, exactly. How far are you going? Well, I'm going about 2 miles on the old Springwater corridor. Okay, I don't think you need that outfit.
So I'm in this yoga studio. We're getting through it, and I'm telling you, like the space. These yoga classes are fun. They're a little too crowded.
Yeah, I need my room. Need to move around.
2 in a row I've had where I've enjoyed it, but like my head is, as I mentioned the one time, in a girl's ass. And this time my ass is in a guy's face.
Whoa.
It's like we're on top of each other a little bit here, okay?
Cat pervert.
What do you do, or what is the thought of twice in the session, older man...
In a hot room, too.
And clearly everybody heard it.
Everybody knows.
It's right behind me next to a guy who was really nice, and he was like, kind of moving a little bit so we're not right on top of each other, like super nice guy. And the old guy's right next to him, and it's just like, and bend over. And breathe out. And
first off,
nobody reacted to it, but everybody reacted to it.
Everybody knows. Everybody can hear it. It's a hot room. Everybody can smell it.
Probably somebody in their mid-60s to early 70s.
I
looked like he was in good shape.
Yeah, he's doing hot yoga. If you're that old doing hot yoga, stretching around, I aspire to have that level of I don't give a you-know-what at that age. I almost want to find this guy and bring him on the show and tip my cap to him. You're in a 97-degree room with a bunch of strangers doing yoga. This is the reason I don't do yoga. It's because I'm terrified of having to fart, especially hot yoga. And then you're uncomfortable because the feeling of holding a fart, we all know how painful it is. And it's 97 degrees and you're bending into weird positions. Right. I want nothing to do with that. But if you tell me I can do that hot yoga class and then just not care at all and let him fly,
right?
I'm in the class. Dude, this guy's my hero, man.
He's your hero?
I couldn't do it. I have too much shame in public at my age to let one of those things rip in that room. But to this guy, dude, good for him, man.
Okay, I hate to...
All of you had to fart the entire time. You know you did. He's the only one that was willing to let it fly.
How long is a hot yoga session? And what does that room smell like when it's all done? Sans the 70-year-old farter.
Yeah, no, good questions. First, his farts didn't stink.
Pure.
Just pure. I had some gas.
Yeah.
It had to release.
Yeah.
At least I didn't smell it, and I wasn't very far away from him.
Maybe the heat killed off the fumes or something.
The funny thing was the second one. Because the first one came kind of at the beginning, and it was like, all right.
Right out of the gate.
It was the back end of the class, and I was looking in the mirror because she was like, use focus points when you're doing these different stances. And so I'm focused in, I'm just looking at myself in the mirror because like 2 gals are in front of me to my right and my left. So I'm like, all right, I'm just going to focus in on my nose. So I'm looking at my nose, and I see the guy behind me, and that second fart came, and we made eye contact, and he made it like, this has been happening to me his whole class.
Help!
Yeah, it was like a scream.
Like, what do you want me to do?
It was a scream for help with his eyes. What did it smell like? Was that one of your questions?
What does the room smell like after 30, 45, 60 minutes? What are we doing?
It's interesting. I'd never seen a yoga studio. I've done hot yoga a couple times. I'd never seen one with carpet. And not like thick carpet. It was pretty thin carpet, but like
That's
still
weird. Like airport carpet.
It's like our carpet.
Yeah.
It was like the carpet we have in our studio. And I'm like,
that's a no-go, dude. Sweat's getting into that stuff. It's just sitting in there like, no, that's, no.
The smell largely didn't change. It kind of, look, it's a great studio. I'm not going to out the name. Great teacher.
Yeah.
Very, like, hospitable. They had water. They had towels. They had showers. Like, great. My only criticism would have been carpet.
Yeah.
Because you could smell it the instant you walked into that studio, and it didn't really change at all because that carpet's already covered in sweat. So it's just stale sweat that's been heated for like however long before you got in there.
Right. Now you're putting more sweat on top of the old sweat, too.
And if you're asking how long it was, 90-minute session.
Yeah, it's a long session.
It was a doozy.
That's a long session.
That was a doozy.
Wow. That's a grind right there.
It was an absolute. I have not sweat. I'm telling you, I've run hood to coast.
Yeah.
Almost 10 times.
A lot of miles.
I've never sweat like that. That was a different sweat.
You're sweating it all out.
It was. I could have wrung my shirt out and it would have just soaked onto the ground.
It's got to be a good feeling, though. I feel like to sweat that much.
I felt very accomplished.
Yeah, you feel good, like you've done something. You got a goal checked off.
Yes.
You're getting a lot of toxins out of your body. There's a good feeling at the end of that, other than breathing in an old guy's fart.
Well, hopefully you're not breathing in old guy farts on a Friday. You're feeling accomplished. You're feeling good. Maybe you've already got a good sweat on today. But yes, I will be here on this Friday. It is a best of edition of Dirt and Sprague. When we come back, the Blazers, a lot of hope that maybe the basketball gods would shine down upon them on the draft lottery. There was no such luck. And so turned to friend of the program, Bill Oram, the following day to try to assess the mood of Blazerland. We'll reprise that for you next year. Glad you are along with us on this Best of Friday. It's Dirt and Sprague here on 1080 The Fan.
Check out the Fan Merch Locker.
There's a lot of people.
Sprague on 1080 The Fan.
Swag back here in our fan studios for this best of edition. The guys enjoying a little vacation today. It has been a busy time with the NBA, NHL playoffs, but for Blazer fans, the waiting has begun. There was hope, fingers crossed, whatever you do, trying to bring some basketball luck to them on that NBA draft lottery. That was May the 12th. No such luck. In fact, the number one overall pick in Cooper Flagg went to the team that was right behind him in the 12th spot, or the 11th spot at the time, the Dallas Mavericks. So the boys reached out the next morning to our good friend Bill Oram, sports columnist for the Oregonian, to get his thoughts, to try to encapsulate the mood of Blazer fan and to figure out how to make the most of the 11th pick.
A day yesterday on the Columbia River trying to catch a salmon, and my success was basically like the Blazers' success in the lottery. Totally skunked. No fish in the river. Bitterly disappointing. My reaction, I think, is probably a little more overarching about kind of the state of the lottery and the notion of building through the draft in the NBA, which is really the only tool that like a third of the NBA has for building for building a winning team. But from the Blazers standpoint, I really think that the lottery sort of validated their approach to the season, which was not, going all out for ping pong balls in the lottery, because you saw what happened to the three teams that tanked the most aggressively and had the worst records in the league. Utah's picking fifth, Washington's picking sixth, Charlotte's picking fourth. Those teams did not put their fan bases through those terrible seasons, for those results. And I don't know where those franchises go from here, because can they really put their fans through another, aggressively tanking season after they saw that it doesn't necessarily pay dividends? So I think from that standpoint, it was a really interesting lottery. From the Blazers standpoint, I mean, look, you went into it knowing there was a really good chance they were going to have the 10th pick. The 11th was in play. So I think from the Blazers standpoint, it's only really disappointing relative to how much movement there was around them. The fact that it was a team that was behind them that jumped up to number one, that all three of the tanking teams were displaced. Like, it created real opportunity for the Blazers, and they just didn't get as lucky. I think that's the disappointment. But I really do wonder where they go from here, because their tools for adding, real high level impact players are just pretty minimal at this point.
I hear your point. We've been talking about this all day, because I've heard that a lot of tanking doesn't work because of where the absolute bottom feeders ended up. I would still argue Portland would rather have the 4th pick than the 11th pick. So maybe Charlotte finds VJ Edgecombe, becomes the next dude for them, and we'll get Derek Queen or whoever the hell they end up getting at 11. Also, 2 games worse than the Spurs. You couldn't have just sat at the last 8 games of the season and you'd have got the 2nd pick. I don't think today is a day where we say tanking doesn't work, because there's different versions of tanking. This franchise tanked last year, they tanked the year before, and they tanked the year before that. This draft's deeper, and they decided that they didn't want to do that anymore, and I still find that wild.
Well, I think that, tanking, I think the most important thing you said there is that tanking looks a lot different in different ways. Yeah. And, look at what Dallas did. Dallas made a decision institutionally that being, the 5th or 6th seed in the West wasn't that important, and traded Luka Doncic. At one point, lost 9 out of 11 games. They lost something like 6 of their last 9 going into the postseason. So even though they made the play-in, they were not playing for the postseason by the end of the year, and they had obviously some injuries as well. But I think that the real tanking, and probably the smart tanking in the NBA, is to probably be in sort of that in that 8 through 12 range as a rebuilding team, and try to thread the needle of having pretty decent lottery odds. Because even though, Dallas still had close to 10% of getting into the top 4, and they were able to, play a somewhat credible season and play in the postseason. And I think that probably is where the smart tanking exists. And in a sense, mediocrity is the new tanking in the NBA. And I just don't think that you're going to see with flattened odds at the top and the expansion of the play-in, those two things, I think, have changed the nature of what tanking is. And by the way, if you were to look over the last few years, it's not just this one draft where it hasn't worked out. Where the last 3 seasons, the number one team has fallen back to 5th. So we're starting to get a larger sample size that shows that the pain is not necessarily worth it when it comes to tanking.
Well, but I would say to that, too, because I think it's 7 straight years the stat is. The worst team record-wise has not gotten the number one pick for 7 straight seasons, so that's remarkable. My only counter to that, because it's got to feel awful, right? You're the worst team. Danny Ainge is running Utah. He clearly is a guy that knows how to win, so he's purposely losing, and that fan base doesn't want to watch what they're putting out. I would also say, people don't always want to go to Charlotte or Washington or Utah. But if you're well run, the 5th pick is still valuable. Like the fact that they can't find players at 4 and 5 or 6 or 3, that's an organizational problem. That's not you're losing games and what is it getting you problem. That's an organizational problem. Oklahoma City is not thriving right now because they've had 4 number one picks. They made good business decisions. They drafted well where they landed. And they've brought in a couple vets. Like there are ways for tiny markets or irrelevant teams to get out of the bottom. It's just a decision of if they're well run. So Charlotte's the 4th pick. Again, that's terrible luck. They might get the best player in the draft, and if they're smart about how they build, they shouldn't be at the bottom for this long.
I agree with all of that, and I think that I think it is probably on days like this good to remember hey, the MVP of the league, not a number one pick in the draft. Who was the last MVP that was a number one pick in the draft? Devin Booker, not a number one pick. Donovan Mitchell, not a number one pick. These are guys who were found around where the Blazers are picking in this draft. Anthony Simons is a different example of somebody who, late teens, became a kind of cornerstone of the franchise for several years. You can do very, very well if you have good player evaluation and you draft smartly. And I completely agree with that. And I don't think it should be the end all be all. But unfortunately, the way the NBA is currently constructed and the way NBA teams operate, there is an outsized emphasis on the draft and draft order, because a draft pick in the NBA can make a bigger difference than any other, major professional sport. And so teams build their entire strategy around being in the best possible position for the draft. And I just think that is what is probably going to have to change, where it can't just be, and I know these teams that we're talking about, the Charlotte, the Utah, the Washington, Portland as well, they have player evaluation teams, they have scouts. They want to be able to find stars throughout the draft wherever they're picking. So it's not like they are just putting all their eggs in the, hey, let's win the lottery and get this one guy basket, because that's not good business either. But I do think that that is the part that is probably going to be de-emphasized going forward, is that the best path is to get the number one pick or the number 2 pick, because I think that the math and the reality is showing that it's just not a very not that it was ever, a dependable strategy, but it is far more chaotic than it has been even historically.
Interesting. We're talking with Bill Oram. He is the columnist at the Oregonian, our good buddy. At Bill Oram on Twitter. You give him a follow there. Check out all his great work on OregonLive.com as well. And you hinted at something, Bill, that I think is the big lingering question that I have out of this. I'm not surprised by last night. That's what the odds were saying, that they were going to be right around 10 or 11. We knew that's where they would fall. And they end up with that pick. I think the bigger question that I have, it's almost twofold, is one, where do they go from here, considering the future assets that they have? We act as if they have 17 first-round picks from Milwaukee. It's 2. Chicago has the rights, I believe, in the swap from whatever trade that was years ago, Derek Jones Jr., whoever, for next year. So potentially losing your first-round pick next year and a bunch of assets on your roster that I don't know how much interest there is around the league. And so I guess the first part is just how do they take the next step genuinely, outside of just saying, hey, our superstar is already on the team, when there's not a lot of evidence to actually back that up. And then the follow-up to that is, do they as an organization and at the end of the day a business, do they care? Or is 40 wins enough to keep this fan base satisfied, making money, and it's an ownership group that doesn't have a long-term stake?
Oh, are we doing this for the entire hour? We have the whole hour to unpack all of that, because there's a lot there, and I'll probably just hang on to the immediate question of the roster, because I think that you're like so right. Like they have good assets in terms of picks. They do, like the Milwaukee pick, especially the 2029 unprotected pick, really, really valuable. They do have issues with the Chicago pick, but I think the most important thing is that their players are probably not as appealing on the open market to go make a trade as they would like to think they are, because they do not want to include Tumani Kamara and Denny Advia in any kind of deal. They want to bring in a player or players who can either complement them, or those guys can complement a star level player. So is a team willing to trade you an all-star caliber player for a package that is built around Shaedon Sharpe? I don't think so. I don't think there's enough confidence that we know that what and who Shaedon Sharpe is. A package that has Shaedon Sharpe, Donovan Clingan, and Scoot Henderson, that's a lot of sort of lottery tickets, in the sense that it's like, hey, maybe collectively that group sort of pans out and gives you something over time, but you're also now trading your last 3 lottery picks and probably some picks going forward. That's a ton of capital. I just don't know that the Blazers are in as good of shape to pull off a trade as you would hope. At least not a direct 1-to-1. Hey, they're going to go trade for. I mean, I'll say Zion Williamson, but whoever, Joel Embiid, what Devin Booker, whatever. I don't think that the teams that would be trading you those players are going to see enough value in the current players the Blazers would be trading back. So I do think you're probably going to see more trades that are along the fringes of things, where getting involved in a 3-team deal, the Milwaukee pick, obviously there's been some chatter around the idea of the Blazers getting involved in a 3-teamer where Milwaukee gets its pick back and the swaps get canceled, and the Blazers siphon off a young caliber player, and for the Bucks it's more about assets. Something like that makes sense. Let's say San Antonio and Milwaukee get involved with a Giannis deal, which right now to me seems like it should be the clear leader. I mean, the Spurs don't particularly need the number 2 pick, although they certainly could continue to build that way. But Milwaukee could use the number 2 pick. And so the idea of Giannis going to San Antonio, well, do the Blazers get involved where the Bucks are getting the number 2 pick, they're getting their picks back from the Blazers, and the Blazers are getting their pick of guys from the Spurs other than Victor Wembanyama? Could you get Castle in a deal like that? That's where it gets really kind of intriguing for the Blazers, where it's not the, hey, we're going to go get Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. We are going to go get somebody young and on the upswing from another team that is themselves making the big swing trade.
Who do you want him to take at 11?
Ooh, mock season or a mock time.
The answer is that I have zero clue. I have not looked closely enough at it. Although because I was on the Columbia River fishing for salmon yesterday, as we were anticipating this lottery and kicking around different ideas, I was joking that, with the number 10 pick in the draft, the Blazers select from Lynn Benton Community College, So, it is a platitude. It is a bit of a cliche. It is a bit of, self-preservation from executives, but there are good players, throughout the draft, and there are good players at 11. I don't know that I've been blown away by the Blazers player evaluation in drafts. I don't know that they've been great in the draft. With Chris Murray was at 21. I don't think it looks like Chris Murray's going to pan out. Their second round picks are a bit of a shot in the dark, but they haven't really panned out either. Their best players are guys they did not draft in Tumani Kamara and Denny Advia. So I'm not yet really sold on the Blazers' ability to go pick out the guy that maybe other teams aren't quite seeing at that 11 spot, but this is why they scout all year. This is why they have people working around the clock on this. And, it's like anything else, it is an opportunity. I just remain to be convinced.
We'll see if there's convincing to be done. The draft coming up at the end of June. We'll hear the conversations with Gary Parrish and Tyler Metcalf on who might be available at 11 for the Blazers coming up in the 7 o'clock hour. But when we come back shortly after that interview, the news came down. The Blazers are up for sale officially. That changed the mood. and the dynamic of how things will work moving forward. So we hunted down our friend Bobby Marks, former front office executive for the Nets, several other teams, as well as now with ESPN. Get his thoughts on how Joe Cronin and Chauncey Billups navigate now that they know the team is up for sale. That when we return on this best of edition of Dirt and Sprague on 1080 The Fan. But first, I've got an update.
Now, from the George McCoy at Warren Allen Sports Desk, a Sports Center update on 1080 The Fan.
Brought to you by 808 Hawaiian Restaurant. Mixed plates like Grandma used to make if your grandma were from the Big Island, Woodstock, Burnside, Beaverton, or online at ate-oh-ate.com. First on the Fan, Knicks refusing to see their season die on their home floor. They controlled Game 5 versus the Pacers start to finish in a 111-94 victory that'll send the Eastern Conference Finals back to Indianapolis for Game 6 Saturday night. You'll hear it right here on the Fan. We've got a rematch in the Stanley Cup Final. The Edmonton Oilers withstood a late push from the Stars to close out the Western Conference Finals in 5 games with a 6-3 victory. Game 1 of the Cup Final Wednesday night in Edmonton against the Florida Panthers. Regional play begins in the NCAA baseball tournament today in both Corvallis and Eugene. Oregon State, the number 8 overall national seed, hosting WCC tournament champion St. Mary's at 5 o'clock on ESPN+. 12th overall seed is the Oregon Ducks. The Big Ten regular season champs start their run against Utah Valley, the WAC tournament champion. 6 p.m. first pitch at PK Park. You can hear it on 910 ESPN Portland. Our pregame coverage begins at 5:45. More sports scores and stories in 30 minutes. Jason Swigart, George McCoy at Warren Allen Sports Desk. Hurt, missing work, insurance companies acting like jerks. Don't call your mom. Call George McCoy at warrenallen.com.
More, please. Golf. This is Dirt and Sprague on 1080 The Fan.
Swag back here with you in the Fan Studios, a best of edition of Dirt and Sprague as they enjoy a little long weekend, getting used to it again, testing the limits of the 4-day work week. We continue, though, with the Blazer talk after Bill Oram, his visit to the show. It was shortly thereafter the statement came from the Blazers that they are officially starting the sale process up for auction bid, and so we quickly hunted down Bobby Marks, who went through this in the front office of the Nets when Prokhorov was putting it up for sale. And so lots of questions to what to expect from Joe Cronin and the team.
I think I was part of a front office that was up for sale like 4 different times and went through 4 different ownership changes. Listen, I've gone through, we had a group called the Sea Caucus 7 that basically were the decision makers, who had 7 different owners. We certainly had Mikhail Prokhorov when he bought the team in 2010. So I've been part of it. I think where things are different, a lot different now than where they were in 2010 or prior to that, is that it doesn't matter if you have an owner, Steve Ballmer, for example. You could have one of the wealthiest people in the world owning your team, but that doesn't mean you should have the highest payroll of any team. Certainly how the rules are constructed nowadays. I think from an ownership standpoint, the resources that they provide, whether it be, there's no salary cap as far as how you put together a staff, certainly from a coaching staff or a front office or scouting, your practice facility, arena upgrades, new arena, right? Like there's all the other things. I think from a team standpoint on the court, I think you're going to see it this summer with Boston, who has a ridiculously high payroll. The rules and the CBA rules and having an owner worth $30 billion really don't go hand in hand in this day and age here. So I do think there's a lot of perks to it, but I do think you have to caution just because if someone's coming in that all of a sudden your payroll is going to double, because that's kind of counterproductive how things are.
Well, could you help us then, Bobby, when you're going through, like when the owner is going to sell and then it's at like the 2-yard line for a Prokhorov, just as an example there.
Sure.
What is a Joe Cronin going through? Obviously, he is scouting. He's getting ready for his draft and whatnot. But, what is it like going through that process behind the scenes, talking to an owner who's not going to be there for all that much longer, while also navigating team building and what's the new owner going to be like? What is that like for Joe Cronin right now?
I think it's similar to what probably Joe and the group have gone through every offseason is, you kind of you present as far as what happened this past year and kind of what the future holds as far as from a roster standpoint. I think, fortunately, whoever decides to by this team, they're, at least from a financial standpoint, are in really good shape, right? Like when you look at kind of the bunch of guys on expiring contracts, you have a number of players on rookie contracts, your draft picks are in good shape. From that element, it's like you're not inheriting a lot of bad contracts, which is a good thing. But I do think for Joe and certainly for Chauncey, I do think it's kind of business as usual. I think probably the biggest thing for them is really just educating whatever prospective owner, whoever decides to be on the rules. I think that's the biggest thing. I think that's where you see teams run into issues. I think you see it in Phoenix with Matt Ishbia when he came in and basically blew up the CBA, and it's really backfired. And I don't care how much money he has, but when you don't have a grasp of the rules, which I don't think he does, that's counterproductive here. So I do think it's about kind of educating an ownership group on the rules, roster building, what your vision is, how you see this team next year and in the next 3 years. We all operate on a 3-year window as far as kind of how we put together teams.
Bobby Marks is our guest, ESPN NBA analyst, and he's also the former front office executive for the Brooklyn Nets. At Bobby Marks 42 on Twitter. You go give him a follow there. You mentioned kind of the salary cap situation that they're in, Bobby. I know that's something that they're very excited about, and the flexibility that they have on the horizon. We'll see what kind of extensions they hand out this offseason. I do think there's a segment of the fan base that is concerned. Like, you're optimistic because you saw steps this year and you saw development from some of the young guys, and you're like, hey, that's great. That's really cool to see. how do you then take the next step? And I'm just wondering from your outsider perspective of like, you clearly don't have a top 5 lottery pick. The lottery happened. You're drafting 11. So it doesn't mean you can't find SGA was the 11th pick. So maybe you find that diamond in the rough. When you look at them and say, okay, you're a nice little team. Maybe next year you're the 10 seed in the West. How do you take, when you're in Portland's position, the next step and not get stuck in that no man's land of not good enough and not bad enough?
Yeah, and that's a good question. I think it's a little bit easier going from, 20 wins to 36 wins, right? Like just far as for the progression, because you're basically, in Portland's position, they didn't sign any free agents last year. Certainly the Denny trade was their big addition and what they did in the draft with Donovan, but they basically kind of kept that group intact, and they, I thought Chauncey did a nice job, and he kind of built off that. Now comes the hard part, right? Like, how do you go from a 36, 37 win team to a team that can win 45, 46 games and be a playoff team? And then how do you take that next step? Now, they're kind of at this crossroads because, like, although from a fan perspective, they can say, oh my God, Portland in 2026 could have, $100 million in cap space. Like, that's not how roster building has come about recently. It's the draft, it's trades, and it's free agency here. I think where you look at, and you look at kind of what Indiana has been able to do, where their team, similar to Portland, that kind of, took a step back, probably not as much as Portland did, with post CJ and Damian. But listen, they added Halliburton, they added Siakam in trades. So I do think you're trying to thread a needle as far as your own players, but I do think you're going to have to make a decision as far as, whether it be Simons and Ayton and, players like that who are Robert Williams, who are on expiring contracts. If you're going to parlay them, I think you'd rather parlay them into players than into cap space. And I think that's kind of how you take that next step. I think what you have within maybe can only take you to a certain level, but then it's going to have to be, okay, we added a second or third best player to this group.
I know it's not something they're considering. Maybe you wouldn't consider it at all. I think it was 6 of the 20 starters of these 4 conference finals teams are via draft. The rest are just trades and free agency.
Yeah.
If you're looking at Portland, you just named a couple guys that we have been naming, but they haven't traded them yet. Ayton, obviously Rob. Would you even consider putting a Scoot out there? I mean, I know he took a little bit of a step this year, but it still wasn't amazing. Shaden is going into his 4th season. We have no idea what his ceiling is at this point. It's been a little up, a little down. Would you even consider the young guys as maybe more return on the asset than maybe some of the vets?
I think you have to be careful with that. I do think when you're in a position, unless you have Stephen Curry or, I won't say Luka because he already got traded. But when you have a top, listen, there's a handful of guys, Jokic, Shea, guys like that are untouchable. You have to look at everything. I think you have to be careful with players that are on rookie contracts, even in a case like Shaden, who's going into the last year, because you basically can control that for the next, 5 or 6 years, as far as maybe even the next contract, compared to a player that's a veteran that's on an expiring contract, which is maybe more of where you're kind of looking at that way. Because what happens is that, and I've been in that position before, where you're trading a young player on a rookie contract for maybe a more of established veteran. Then you better convince that player that he's going to resign there, and it's going to probably cost you a lot more. And I think, I go back to Indiana, what they did in the Siakam trade. They got Pascal for 6 months, and then basically what happened last year, getting to a conference finals, that sold him on re-signing with them for the next 4 years. And that's kind of, if you're going to go about doing that, you better be comfortable that you're going to sign that player for long term, because you just can't do a guy in a rental for 6 months and maybe it gets you into the playoffs, and now you're kind of taking a step back.
More with Bobby Marks and what the Blazers do here this offseason while the team is up for sale. It's a best of edition. Dirt and Sprague Swag here with you on a Friday on 1080 The Fan.
Get in the zone, AutoZone. on 1080 The Fan.
Swag back here with you on a Friday, this best of edition. Much of early in the month was spent worrying about what the Blazers are going to do with the 11th pick and who is going to be the new owner eventually as the team was put up for sale. We returned to our conversation with Bobby Marks of ESPN earlier in the month.
We've reached this parity era of the NBA that I think is very exciting, and we'll now have 7 different champions in 7 years run. I don't believe that's ever happened in the league, and I'm getting all excited about where the future is going to go. Yeah. And then I'm seeing Bobby Marks tweets about how many max contracts the Oklahoma City Thunder are going to be able to afford, and I'm like, Bobby, you're dumping on my dreams here. So is this a new super team?
It's so funny because I put that out there, and it's like almost like telling somebody I got all these great Christmas presents, but I can't tell them what it is, right? Because I've already listen when the Thunder when they were going into Game 7, I had to write their off-season article, and it's already written, and it really lays out kind of where their future is. And if there's a team that I won't say can defeat CBA, but can navigate around these harsh restrictions, it's Oklahoma City. And they're going to be able to afford Shea and Jalen Williams and Chet. They'll probably have to make some decisions on Lou Dort or maybe Isaiah Hartenstein. But the beauty of Oklahoma City and how they built their roster is that they've structured it where Isaiah's got a team option 2 years from now. Isaiah Joe, Aaron Wiggins, there's flexibility there. And they got 2 first-round picks this year, 15 and 24, and they could have 4 next year. So when the cost starts to get higher, you have the surplus of younger, inexpensive players. Cason Wallace is a great example. That will eventually replace maybe some of your higher costs here. But no, I don't see the CBA defeating Oklahoma City where they're going to say we can only pick Jalen Williams and not Chet Holmgren here. I do think, especially where the cap's going to be going, where it's increasing here. So I think they'll be in fine shape. I don't think we have a 1-year window that this team is going to be broken up.
Who do you think gets Giannis if he asks out? Let's do that.
Ooh.
If he asks out, and so far there's no reporting that he has.
Yeah.
If it gets to that point, who's the team that you think steps up and says, here's the stuff, we're going all in on this?
Well, I think there's 2 ways to look at it. If I were Giannis and I decided that it's not Milwaukee anymore, I would try to do my best trying to stay east. I mean, I don't want anything to do with the Western Conference. No offense. Like, I would try to where the East is going to be. Certainly, where Boston might be going, and who knows with Cleveland and some of these other teams. It's hard to see what team that would be in the East. But I think when you look at the whole league, I mean, what San Antonio has, I would think probably jumps to the leaderboard where you've got 2, you've got 14, you've got some contracts that you can move. You still have some draft picks in the future. I think it's just a matter of kind of what direction. The hard part with Milwaukee is they don't control their first until 2031. So you got to make sure that you're getting as much as you can and try to do a rebuild here. So I think it's going to be interesting to watch over the next month here as far as it's going to be up to him. If he wants out, and I understand why he would want to, then he will go there to the front office and he'll ask out, and we'll start that process.
How many times have you been asked if the NBA lottery is rigged?
Oh my God! Don't read Twitter on that Monday after the. Holy goodness gracious! Listen, I've been in the room.
Yeah,
I've been in the room when I was in New Jersey. When I don't even know. I think we had the 8th pick and we stayed at 8. I understand the process. It happens really quick. I think what happens now is that you have if you're picking 1 going in, you have a better chance of picking 5 than you have at 1. And I don't think people realize that as much as far as kind of where the odds are this day and age here. So yeah, I would say it's not rigged. I think it's just a matter of the system, the new system that the league has put in, is that it doesn't reward if you have the worst record in the NBA during the season with the number 1 pick.
Yeah, but let's be real. If you're Danny Ainge, you're throwing a chair through a window watching Nico get that, right?
It's similar to what Detroit has gone through.
Yeah.
Right? Detroit went through, and I lived through it, and we were 12-70 in New Jersey. Oh. We had the 3rd pick. We had a number 1 pick going into the lottery. That was the John Wall draft, and we wound up picking 3rd. And that was when that favored teams who finished worse. So I get it. I mean, it puts a lot of pressure on your scouting department. They'll find a good player, and Portland will get a good player if they stay where they are. They've done a really good job drafting and stuff. But it does I'd love to be drafting Cooper Flagg instead of a different player at number 1. And Utah will have their work cut out for them.
Can I ask you very quickly, because we appreciate the time, we know we're against it here. So you took, according to this, you guys took Favors at number 3. I'm just curious why Boogie and Paul George and Hayward. Where, like, how parsing out, I guess, need versus best player, how close that is for you guys?
We thought DeMarcus Cousins was probably the better. I think Evan Turner was in that. Was Evan Turner? Wesley Johnson.
Evan Turner was 2.
Wesley
was in that
Johnson was in there. We had Favors and Cousins. Those were the 2 guys. We thought if we ever had to make a trade, that Favors the return value would be higher on Favors. I know we didn't even draft a guy yet. We're already thinking about trading him. But the return value, just because, listen, Cousins was not the easiest. You saw him play this season in his career. He was not the easiest guy from a locker room, on the court, coachability standpoint. And we felt that with Derek, it was probably more of a safer pick.
Well, we'll see what the Blazers have in mind with that 11th pick. To start the 8 o'clock hour, we'll check and reprise our conversations with Tyler Metcalf of the No Ceilings podcast. Gary Parrish, CBS Sports, works out of Memphis. Spent a lot of time on the draft and college basketball. Who might be available at 11? As we head to hour 2, this best of edition, Dirt and Sprague Swag here with you on a Friday on 1080 The Fan. Swag back with you from
Now, from the George McCoy at Warren Allen Sports Desk, a Sports Center update on 1080 The Fan.
First on The Fan, the Thunder still waiting for an opponent in the NBA Finals. Knicks get over in Game 5 of the Eastern Conference Finals, 111-94 over the Pacers. They'll go back to Indy. Game 6 Saturday night. You will hear it right here on The Fan. Regional play starts today for the NCAA baseball tournament. Corvallis and Eugene both hosting Oregon State, the number 8 overall national seed. Starts with the WCC tournament champion St. Mary's, 5 o'clock tonight on ESPN+. The Oregon Ducks are the 12th overall seed. They get the WAC tournament champion Utah Valley, 6 o'clock at PK Park. We'll have it for you on 910 ESPN Portland with pregame coverage starting at 5:45. Ducks softball team trying to win its first national championship. They're going to have to take the scenic route. They lose the opener of the Women's College World Series to UCLA 4-2 on a walk-off 2-run home run. Ducks will face Ole Miss today in an elimination game, 6:30 first pitch on ESPN. More sports scores and stories in 30 minutes. Jason Swigart from the George McCoy at Warren Allen Sports Desk. Hurt, missing work, insurance companies acting like jerks. Don't call your mom. Call George McCoy at warrenallen.com.
It's back. The 11th annual Fan Golf Classic at Langdon Farms Golf Club happens Tuesday, June 24th. Presented by your local Toyota dealers. Reserve your foursome now at 1080thefan.com. This is Dirt and Sprague.
9:15. Let's have a great day, everybody. Cut this.
With Andy Dirt Johnson.
I said that I wanted to have kids, and you said that you wanted me to have a vasectomy. What did I do? And then, when you said that you might want to have kids, and I wasn't so sure, who had the vasectomy reversed? And then when you said you definitely didn't want to have kids, what, it reversed back?
And Brendan Sprague.
Snip, snap, snip, snap, snip, snap. You have no idea the physical toll that 3 vasectomies have on a person.
Dirt and Sprague on 1080.
They're not gonna catch us. We're on a mission from God.
The Fan.
Hour number 2, Swag here with you on a Friday as the guys enjoy a day off well earned after a very busy month of May. And once Blazer fans got over the disappointment of not moving up into the draft lottery, the team now up for sale. That boosted spirits just a touch. The question became, is there somebody at 11 that the Blazers can unearth, find, and maybe turn into a potential SGA? So the guys turned to Tyler Metcalf of the No Ceilings podcast on what might be available there at 11.
Unfortunately, disappointed. It's kind of a tough range for them because there's some really fun shooters and wings. They'll probably end up going a little before that. There's plenty of talent to be excited about, but I think they're kind of in this range where they might just be a little bit behind where they wanted some of their top guys. So it'll be really interesting to see if they keep the pick, if they move it, or just kind of what route they go, given how the draft falls.
Yeah, how do you gauge this? I think the tough thing for us out here is we look at the mocks, and you guys do such an exceptional job, is just gauging. Are you finding somebody that's going to fall because of the amount of talent in this draft versus taking maybe a swing, a player that isn't projected to go necessarily as high, but they're at 11 because maybe the upside's high enough? Like, if you're advising the Blazers, how are you gauging what's going to be around in the 10, 11, 12 area?
Yeah, and the way they've kind of approached their drafts, especially in these last couple of years, is taking the biggest swing possible and taking the highest upside guy and then trying to fill in for fit and need with some of their later picks or in free agency or, even trades like we saw with that Denny trade. But I'm really fascinated to see, because we see it every year, someone inevitably falls, at least a little bit. And whether that's going to be Kaspers Yakashonis or maybe Con Knipple, who's been one of the hottest names on the street currently, I think he'll probably go top 5, 6, 7. But if he falls, he's a perfect fit. And this is a really kind of a tough center class. So if teams reach on some bigs like a Kaman Malawach and maybe a couple guys like a Derek Queen and Thomas Sorber, if teams in the top 10 ahead of Portland reach a little bit on those guys, it could push some of those really fun and intriguing guards or wings who provide a little bit more shooting and athleticism down to where the Blazers are.
Interesting. We're talking with Tyler Metcalf, No Ceilings Podcast, at TMetcalf11 on Twitter. You can go give him a follow. If you're just to kind of ballpark where the number runs out on, if you're, this X number of players are elite or guys that I would be kind of tripping over myself to go get. Is it 4 guys? Is it 5, 7, 8? How many names kind of jump out in your head of, that guy's got a legitimate chance to go be a star in the NBA?
I would probably be around like that 4 mark with 5 and 6 peeking in with a little more of an outside chance where if a lot of things go right, they could definitely hit there. But like the 3 biggest names, and obviously the 2 biggest ones, are Cooper Flagg, who's in my eyes the best college prospect since Anthony Davis, Dylan Harper, who looks like a mix of De'Aaron Fox and Cade Cunningham, Ace Bailey's upside is tremendously high. I'm a huge Trey Johnson fan. And then you have guys like VJ Edgecombe and Jeremiah Fears who have some pretty major holes in their game. But when you look at how much they've grown over the last year and factor in the intangibles and then along with what they do on the court, there's some really exceptionally fun outcomes with them if a couple things go right.
Yeah, Tyler, Derek Queen has been mocked a little bit by some as in that area where the Blazers are. I think technically he's listed as center. We've got one of those. I know their games aren't exactly the same. Is Queen one of the players that you think can mold into a 4 at the next level? And is that one that makes sense with what Portland currently is?
It's really tricky with Queen because his offensive game is so exceptionally fun. And we see the footwork, the passing, especially going back to high school. He's got so much more passing to his game, kind of like Klingon showed in college, and a little less so in his rookie year. But the big thing with Queen, if he's going to transition down to the 4, which I think he'll inevitably need to, is he's going to have a major body transformation like we saw from Naz Reid in Minnesota, and where he's able to utilize his footwork and agility a little better since he's not the most explosive athlete. And then that outside shot's really going to have to come around. The mid-range numbers are good. The touch is encouraging. The outside numbers weren't great this year. He's never been much of a shooter, but I think there are some indicators that long-term he can grow into that role. So if the shot really takes a step forward like we kind of think and hope it does, and it's paired with that pretty significant body transformation, I definitely think there's some really high-level outcomes for him as the A4.
Yeah, it's interesting because with the 11th overall pick, I think we all are in agreement the chances of landing something are slim. But we have seen 11th overall pick. SGA, for example, going to win MVP this year. He was the 11th overall pick. So there have been some of them. I'm curious to ask you just on the upside of like a player you're willing to gamble on, that clearly it's an unknown, but somebody you said, man, whether it's his physical traits, whether it's the shooting ability, whether it's the intelligence that comes with the game, whatever the case may be, is there a guy there at 11 if they do keep the pick, which we think that they will, you say, that is definitely worth the swing. I wouldn't peg him as an all-star or an MVP kind of guy, but if X, Y, and Z goes right, that kind of gamble makes sense there at 11.
Carter Bryant, small forward from Arizona, is really, really high on my list, and the type of guy you kind of talk about. Awesome athlete, and I just talked about body transformation with Queen, but I saw Carter 2 years ago and then 3 years ago even out at Nike Hoop Summit, and the way that his body transformed in terms of putting on significant muscle, getting more explosive while not losing any of that lateral agility was incredibly impressive. And all year, his role at Arizona was really frustrating because Tommy Lloyd didn't play him a ton. But every time he was on the court, he just produced winning basketball and made that team so much better. And for a freshman role player to do that is really rare. He might be the best perimeter defender in this class, really big-time athlete, smart passer. I buy the shot as that off-ball kind of 3-and-D role player wing. I really love his upside. Handle continues to improve. The outcomes with him get a lot more exciting. And then some older guys whom I think make a ton of sense are Neek Clifford from Colorado State, Rasheer Fleming from St. Joseph's, and then one of the fastest risers in this draft, Cedric Howard from Washington State.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I want to say, though, on the side there, Tyler, my producer was in my ear literally as we were asking you that last question, and he goes, Carter Bryant's the guy I wanted you to ask about. And literally the question goes, and you say Carter Bryant. And hearing about Carter Bryant, who I believe is listed at 6'8", and he's got good frame, as you mentioned. He's only 19 years old. Perimeter defense is great. That's kind of right up their alley. They talked a lot at the end of the season about their defense, and that was the turning point for the way they kind of ended their season. Tamani Kamara took a big step. How is he as an offensive player? Is still really raw? Can he develop a three-point shot if he doesn't have one yet? How do you view Carter Bryant? Good defender. How is he offensively?
Yeah, the handle needs a lot of work, so I wouldn't view him as, maybe this is some fun small forward jumbo creator type guy. But as like a connective passer, he keeps the ball moving, makes smart reads, sees the floor really well, really good cutter, above the rim finisher, super athletic, crashes the offensive glass, and I really do buy the shot. I think the mechanics are really good. He's improved every year over the past couple of years through high school and then at Arizona. It's just really tough when we watch that Arizona film because of the role that he was given, and so much of their offense was Caleb Love and Jaden Bradley dribbling the air out of the ball and kind of going ISO, and he was just there to clean up plays and finish it out. So I think he has so much more growth left in his game that I would be pretty surprised if he's not 38, 39, maybe even 40 at the peak of his career from outside. And he's at 37.1% from three this year. So I think they're really, really high or exciting outcomes with him. I just can't stress enough that it's as an off-ball guy, and there isn't. I would be really surprised if there's that on-ball role that he grows into.
You know, for covering prospects and the draft processes as well as you guys do, I'm curious how much, because I listened to the pod and I'm fascinated by this side of it. You guys understand the value of these draft picks. You understand that these are the next waves and the franchise turning type players for a lot of teams. Portland leaned in last year at the end and said, no, we want to try to get an Alex Sarr. Didn't work out for him in the draft, but they got Klingon. The year before that, they did it. They got Scoot. And they did the year before that, they ended up with Shaden Sharp. So I'm curious from your vantage point in a draft that you guys had been talking about last year in this same time of the talent and whatnot. Do you look at teams like Portland and you say, what? Because we didn't really shut it down. We lost a couple games at the end, but largely they never really shut it down this year. That confused us out here. We just assumed they would because they had. They didn't, and it's a deeper draft. What was your takeaway, I guess, of the way Portland handled the way that their season ended versus what they had done the three previous seasons?
Yeah, and it's always kind of a tough line to ride because you're rebuilding until you're not. But you also don't want to get stuck in that kind of treadmill of mediocrity either. I think I really liked how they approached this season because they were relatively healthy for most of the year. And at some point, you have to start establishing a winning culture and winning habits and learn how to win games. Because if you just keep funneling in young talent without the expectations and the experience and the discipline, making the playoffs, you never really learn it. So I think for a lot of these guys, it gets really undersold how important having some of those winning practices is. It would have been great if they were able to bring in another top 5 pick to this young core. But when you bring in a guy like Denny, who had the season he did, and Tumani makes the jump like he did, and Scoot is steadily starting to figure some stuff out, and then you're getting the impact from your front court as well. At some point, you have to start winning games and figure out what that feels like. And in a draft like this, where there are some really, in that 10 to 14 range in that back half of the lottery, there's some talented role players that you can get. I don't think it's the worst thing by any means.
So can the Blazers find that diamond in the rough, Carter Bryant, and develop them into a key cog moving forward? We wanted to get more opinions. Gary Parrish covers college basketball for CBS Sports, amongst other things, still working out in Memphis. He joined and shared his thoughts on the pool this year. We'll talk to or reprise that conversation next as we continue on with our best of Dirt and Sprague here on a Friday on 1080 The Fan. Swag back there with you, guiding you through this best of edition of Dirt and Sprague on a Friday. We finish up the Blazer portion of the show with Gary Parrish covering college basketball for CBS Sports, working out there in Memphis. A little different perspective on who the Blazers might take, who might be available there with the 11th pick, and it begins. Dirt was not happy to see in his latest mock draft, however, another 6'3" combo guard being who Gary Parrish liked.
Past injury stuff and issue stuff is never an excellent predictor of the future, but I can understand why you can deal with PTSD. As someone who lives here in Memphis, you know, we once passed on Steph Curry to take Hashim Thabit with the number 2 overall pick in a draft. So anytime a traditional center who's considered a defensive presence is in the Grizzlies' range, there is somebody who always brings that up and says, no, not again. So I hear where you're coming from. With Jace, I'm just a believer in him, period. And at that point in the draft, if he's still available, he is somebody I would have on the list of best prospects available. He's, yes, a smaller combo guard, but once he was placed into the starting lineup at Michigan State, because he did not begin the season there, he was really tremendous. Over about a 15-game stretch, averaging 16 points, 5 rebounds per contest, obviously took them pretty deep into that bracket. He became their best player over time, and I don't know that they thought he was going to be that in the preseason. Just because his dad was a longtime veteran in the NBA guarantees nothing, but that is something I can tell you front offices do value. The children of professional athletes, not just NBA players, but was your mom a serious athlete? Was your dad a baseball player, a football player? Just growing up around professionals is something that there is some evidence that pays dividends for prospects. So you throw all that into a pot, mix it up, and I think you've got a legitimate lottery option in Jace Richardson. And for a Portland franchise that has some interesting front court pieces, but still obviously needs a lot to get back into a place where you're contending for anything of significance. Mm-hmm. I do think you look for best prospect available, somebody who could develop into a difference maker. And at least in my mind, Jace Richardson is one of those guys.
Did anything surprise you coming out of the Combine after all the workouts, all the interviews? What stuck out to Gary Parrish about the Combine this year?
Well, I think one of the bigger headlines is that just Ace Bailey is not some 6'10" wing the way he's been described for more than a year now. Like, everybody talks about him like he's Kevin Durant. And he is an interesting prospect, and I understand why everybody has him in the top 5, myself included. But without shoes, he measured just a little better than 6'7". He is not a 6'10" wing. And I know that might not matter dramatically. It's not going to be the type of thing that sends him from being the 3rd pick to the 13th. But just suddenly he's a little more average size than you would have thought. And when you consider that at the collegiate level, he did nothing but score, impacted the game in no other way, there starts to be some real question marks surrounding him. Not whether he'll go in the top 10 or the lottery, but you talk to front office people really throughout the season, but especially post-Combine, and they will tell you that he's a pretty divisive prospect. Some people think he has a chance to be the best player from this draft, Cooper Flagg included, if he actually reaches his potential, like if his actual game film starts to line up more with his highlights, because the highlights are tremendous. There's just not a lot of them. They're not consistent. But there are people who believe in the upside of the potential. There are others who think he's, an average-sized wing who does nothing but try to score and impacts the game in no other positive way, and you pass on people like that because you don't win with them. I think the truth is probably somewhere in the middle. I'm a little lower on him than some, but I'm still intrigued by the talent, even though, to circle back to the original point, he did not measure well at the Combine.
Interesting. We're talking about Gary Parrish of CBS. You can check out all his great work, CBSSports.com, college basketball analyst. He's also on a Grind City Media in Memphis, at Gary Parrish, CBS on Twitter. As we're looking at that 11 spot, I mean, I joke with you about Jace Richardson, but I see all the arguments you're making. You don't want to make those same mistakes twice of, we've made this mistake in the past, so let's not ever take a 6'3" guard again. Who are the other guys kind of in that range for you? I know Carter Bryant's a name that's shown up a lot when we started to talk about draft stuff. You have him,
Cedric
Howard. I mean, Derek Queen's a name that's kind of in that mix. Who are the guys in that range that are realistic for Portland that do stand out to you? Is there like a pecking order of, man, if this guy's there at 11, that's the guy that you want to absolutely take a swing on? How do you feel about that portion of the draft?
So I'm glad you brought up Carter Bryant, because he's somebody, and probably the main person, I have changed my opinion on since the end of the college basketball season. Like, I'm privy to all of the numbers. I have conversations with front offices. I know that he's been on their radar, even if he was just a role player at Arizona. But as you watch these playoffs unfold, the thing that becomes undeniable is that everybody needs, switchable wings with size who can knock down a shot and make big plays on the defensive end of the court. Like the Knicks are in the Eastern Conference Finals right now. Sure, because Jalen Brunson is awesome and because New York City has become a real advantage for them. Just the whole scene is something special. But having Mikal Bridges and OG Anunoby and Josh Hart, like just gritty wings that can switch everything and make a shot and provide toughness and length and just difficult matchups, those guys are immensely valuable. They'll never be in the Hall of Fame, or at least they probably won't be in the Hall of Fame, but they can help you hang banners. And so Mikal Bridges is a great example of this. He's coming out of Villanova. He checks all of these boxes that we're talking about, but people are still debating, do you really use a top 10 pick on somebody who projects as never going to be a star? Probably best case scenario, he's a really good role player. Well, eventually he does, get picked 10th in that draft, but it was 10th. It wasn't 4th. It wasn't 6th. And then you fast forward a few years later, and guess what the Knicks are willing to do? Quite literally give up 5 first-round picks for that guy because he can do that thing. So I am not against taking projected role players, particularly 3-and-D wings, very high in the draft because you win with those guys. And Carter Bryant, I can't promise you he's going to pan out. Every general manager in the NBA has missed on a guy like this. Right. But he checks the boxes. 6'8", he can make a shot. He is a plus defender, takes pride on that end of the court, still very young. Just if you were trying to identify somebody in that range who could develop into fast forward 5 years and you need a stop, and that's the guy that you took back in the 2025 NBA draft, and he's going to be the one who gets it for you, you'll never regret having that guy on your roster if he develops into that thing, and Carter Bryant's got a chance to do it.
Gary, it feels like we've maybe hit a little bit of a sweet spot here. It's been a while since this has happened, right? The high schoolers leave and NBA teams draft them, and then they can't stop themselves. The league steps in, says we're doing a one-and-done rule, and for a long time I would argue it kind of killed college basketball. These kids come in, they play, they're gone. We don't get to see them grow in college. They go straight to the NBA. It feels like NIL has maybe balanced this a little bit. Now, you're still going to get your Cooper Flaggs, your Ace Baileys, your Dylan Harpers, but I'm curious how many NBA people now maybe like that these kids are going back to college. They're making a ton of money to go back, $2-3 million maybe a season, whatever it is, and they're a little more polished. How this has kind of balanced it out a little bit in the NIL world, where college hoops is bringing back rosters or players we recognize, while also the NBA is getting maybe more experienced, more polished products in the draft.
I think it's great for everybody. And I know that people get a little turned off by the money and the transactional nature of what college sports has become in many ways. But it's good for college basketball to have great players in school. It's good for college basketball to have recognizable players in school. And for a while, let's just talk about Jalen Brunson for a second, since he came up earlier. Jalen Brunson was not ready to go be a lottery pick when he left Villanova. He wasn't even going to be a first-round pick, probably. But there was just sort of an idea there of, I've won national championships. I've been the National Player of the Year. It's just time to get on with it, my professional career, whatever that looks like, as opposed to go back to college and play basketball again for a scholarship and a cost of attendance stipend. Well, if you fast forward Jalen Brunson's career to present day, I am quite confident he would probably just go back to Villanova for another year because they'd pay him $4 million and he would be worth more in college than he would have been as a rookie in the NBA. And that is what we're seeing all over the sport right now. Like you said, this will change nothing for a Cooper Flagg or a Dylan Harper or an Ace Bailey. Those guys are projected one-and-done top 5 picks coming out of high school. They live up to those expectations in their 1 years of college, and now they'll be drafted accordingly. They have to go. There's too much money involved, and there's also too much future stuff involved where those are the type of prospects that they want to get to that second contract as soon as possible because that's where you get the generational wealth. But for anybody outside of what we're talking about, and at this point, I would say anybody who's not a lock to go like in the top 20 of the draft, you need to seriously be considering staying in college another year, because if you are a great college player, regardless of what your NBA prospects are, you can literally make 3.5, 4.5, $5 million in 1 year of college basketball right now. Think about it. We're talking about playing at most 40 games, and you're playing on national television in sold-out arenas. You're probably the best player on your team for $4 million. That is a lot more attractive than being drafted 37th. Sure, getting you a contract, but you're probably splitting time between the NBA and the G League. When you're in the G League, you're on commercial flights, row 34B, connecting in Atlanta, going to a little arena, playing in front of nobody on a streaming service. Or you can play on Big Monday, and make more money. So it's drawing people back to college, and it is allowing the NBA to have a more of a developmental process at the college level, and it's allowing college basketball to be better than it's been in a long time. I don't think it's a coincidence that 4 of the best 10 basketball teams of the entire Ken Pom era, which dates back to the 90s, happened to make the Final Four this season. Why is that? In my opinion, it's because there are more good, experienced players in college basketball right now than there's been in a long time, and we're getting better basketball, period.
Interesting. Well, you didn't help me recover from my PTSD from 6'3" guards, but maybe
How did he not do that?
maybe I'm on the road. Maybe I'm on the pathway to see the light. I'm not
Yes.
quite there yet, but Gary Parrish has helped me see the light.
Guess who else was a 6'3" combo guard coming out of college?
Oh,
Gary
Steph
Parrish.
Curry.
Oh, yeah.
that's,
touche.
that's true. He's pretty good.
Hey, Gary, real quick, before we let you go, we appreciate the time, by the way. Love your work. I think Walter Clayton Jr. could be Jamal Murray, and his measurements kind of came in close, I think, to where Jamal currently is. Your thoughts on him?
He could be Jamal Murray. He could be Shabazz Napier. It's hard to know. Here's what I do know. Before that NCAA tournament run, nobody was really talking about Walter Clayton as a first-round prospect. Then he was amazing, and I use that word intentionally. He was incredible throughout that run and did a lot of stuff that makes you think, man, why won't this work in the NBA? But he is on the smaller side. He doesn't take much of an interest on the defensive end of the court. And you can be the best shot maker and shot creator in the world, but if a coach can't play you because you can't guard your position, it doesn't matter how – you can't shot create from the bench. And that would be my concern with him. Is he good enough? He's great at some things. Is he good enough at the other things to get on the court, stay on the court so that he can do those other things? Those are questions, but, this is hard. Sam Presti is widely considered to be the best of the best, and even he misses on guys basically every year. This is among the hardest things to do is identify which prospects are going to work and why. And Walter Clayton Jr. is a great example of that. There are people who would take him in the top 25 and others who would tell you we wouldn't touch him in the top 45.
Well, Dirt, let's get him back on when we trade for Jaron Jackson Jr. and we take him from Memphis.
Wow. Shots fired, man.
Unless you guys want to be the ones to give him $350 million, then maybe you can take him.
June 25th, the NBA draft, and we'll find out who indeed the Blazers take if they keep that 11th pick. All right, we shift the focus to football next. A fascinating conversation with Mike Silver, who got access inside the Jaguars' war room as they pulled off the big draft day trade. Just an unbelievable access and a conversation. That is up next on this best of edition of Dirt and Sprague. But first, I got an update.
Now, from the George McCoy at Warren Allen Sports Desk, a Sports Center update on 1080 The Fan.
Brought to you by Vulcan Design and Construction. Check out their award-winning outdoor living designs or schedule your free design consultation at vulcandc.com. First on The Fan. Knicks aren't ready to go home just yet. They controlled the Pacers in Game 5 of the Eastern Conference Finals. Pretty much the entire game, a 119-94 victory. They'll go back to Indy Game 6 Saturday night. You'll hear it right here on The Fan. We have a rematch for the Stanley Cup Final. The Oilers polished off the Stars in Dallas 6-3 to claim the Western Conference Final in 5 games. They see if they can take down the Florida Panthers beginning Wednesday night in Edmonton. Regional play starts today in the NCAA baseball tournament. Corvallis and Eugene hosting regionals. Oregon State begins with WCC tournament champion St. Mary's, 5 o'clock on ESPN+. While the 12th-seeded Oregon Ducks begin with Utah Valley, the WAC tournament champion, 6 o'clock first pitch from PK Park. You'll hear it on 910 ESPN Portland with pregame coverage starting at 5:45. More sports scores and stories in 30 minutes. Jason Swigard from the George McCoy at Warren Allen Sports Desk. Hurt, missing work. Insurance companies acting like jerks. Don't call your mom. Call George McCoy at warrenallen.com.
This is your home for some stories can slip through the cracks.
Now, before we do this, let's go over the ground rules.
Pelican Brewing presents The Daily Ticker, where Dirt and Sprague hit the big stories you've heard about. and some you haven't.
How'd you do that? Actually, I'm not even mad. It's amazing.
The Daily Ticker with Dirt and Sprague is brought to you by Pelican Brewing, independently brewing on the Oregon coast since 1996. Discover even more flavors from your local coast with Pelican's new craft sodas. Pelican Brewing, born at the beach.
Indeed, the Daily Ticker brought to you by our friends at Pelican Brewing. Experience your hops differently with Pelican's new hop-infused hard seltzer. Hard hops blackberries infused with strata hops made with real blackberries and available now at a store near you. Sounds refreshing on this weekend where it appears summer is going to tease us, as is the fact that we're less than 100 days to go to the kickoff of college and NFL seasons for football. We go back just after the NFL draft. There was one big draft day deal. It involved the Jacksonville Jaguars. And Mike Silver, the longtime sports author and reporter in the NFL, was able to be in the war room for the Jags this draft. He was kind enough to take some time and join the guys and just discussed at first what it takes to get an invite into the war room on draft day.
First of all, getting into any draft room is a monumental achievement. I've been lucky enough to do it about 5-6 times. A couple of my colleagues in the business have accomplished it, including Peter King, but it is rare. So, it's not like I sat there with a menu of 32 teams going, well, I think this would be the right spot. But, I would add to that I was really intrigued by the Jaguars story, that I sense that they're trying to do something big and bold. There's a reset going on. You've got 3 people coming in new who seem to be very aligned, and Tony Baselli, who's now the executive VP of football operations, Liam Cohen, the rookie coach, and James Gladstone, the aforementioned GM, who some people think looks like he's 12. So, I did think it was a cool story that was a larger story to be written. Now, them trading up to get Travis Hunter on night one was an added bonus, but it was really cool. And I did write a quick story that night and then a longer one that dropped Tuesday, and people will see in that second one. There was actually a lot of drama on day 2 as well, so it worked out great.
Yeah, that Tuesday edition was it's one of the best reads I've read, and I love The Athletic, but that was a fantastic write-up by you, and I kind of felt like I was in the corner with a notebook writing things down, like as if I was you watching all of that unfold. What were your other, apologies for not knowing top of my head, you mentioned, I think you said this is the 5th time you've been in a draft room. What are the other 4 experiences like? What's the most memorable one for you?
It might have been more. Well, when Jeff Fisher took over the Rams, I got in that first year, and then subsequently I was in the Rams war room several times. Once I was there when Michael Sam was drafted, which was wild, on day 3. And that encompassed I was at Yahoo, then NFL Network, so I wrote that one for NFL.com. The last time I was in the Rams war room was when Jared Goff went number 1 overall. They did that in downtown LA at a Courtyard by Marriott. Thanks for asking. They were kind of setting it all up in LA still. It was wild. But, so I saw some really cool things. I did get in the Jaguars war room back in the Dave Caldwell era when they took Dante Fowler with the first overall pick. That was 10 years ago. That was just for I was in there for about an hour, but got to see the pick. That was really cool. And then my most recent one was also, before this, was also Jags related, but it was the virtual draft. So I got some virtual access via the app House Party, which somehow is still on my phone, and I don't think I've used it since. I'm kind of old. I might be outside the House Party demo, but it worked that night. It was fun.
Well, could you walk us, because we're all football fans, whether we do media or we're just fans who consume media and love the sport, we all watch this draft, and we go, could I do this job? Could I make a list of players, sit in a room, and then my turn, okay, I'll take the guy I had at the highest on my board. I'm just curious, could you walk us through what it's like to be in this draft room and watch the process unfold? What don't people understand about running and doing a draft?
Well, I mean, I think everyone's like fantasy drafted, so we all think we could, right? I just, it's interesting 'cause sometimes it feels boring, right? A long time between picks. And I'm not one of those people who does instant draft analysis in terms of, outcome of how good the players are, but I do evaluate process because if a team goes in with a plan and a clear, approach and executes it the way they want or adjusts on the fly, I give good marks for that. So, you kind of rank them and you say, oh, we're just going to be true to the board. But a lot of times, you do have position needs. You're wondering other teams have certain needs who might, trade above you, who might try to, torpedo you. I think what's interesting is, and I do write about this in the story that dropped Tuesday, is people get these draft crushes, right? You're doing this for months and months and months and having so many meetings and overthinking it. And so in this case, Tony Baselli had this draft crush on this offensive lineman from LSU that he really, really wanted. But in the end, they chose between him and another offensive lineman with the 89th pick, Wyatt Milam for West Virginia. The offensive line coach, the GM, the coach were skewing that way a little. So Baselli took one for the team there, but he did have to give up his draft crush. 2 picks later, the Ravens took off the board. And the Ravens are like the classic team that just picks value and lets the board come to them a lot. So, it's fun when it happens in real time. The other thing I think, fans might not appreciate is, we see the clock ticking. And, there's a very real consequence if you don't get the pick in. I think it was about 20 plus years ago, maybe 2003, the Vikings famously thought they had a trade worked out with the Ravens. There was a snafu with the communication with the league. They got bypassed they had the 7th overall pick. They got bypassed by the 8th and 9th team quickly before they could recover and put in the cards. So the embarrassment and the loss of draft position, you really don't want time to run out. So, a lot of times you're waiting as the clock goes because a late trade offer might come in or you're considering one still, and there are other options. In the story I wrote, the Jags had worked out a trade with the Lions where they were going to trade down from 70. But the communication with the league office, I would say it was on the league side, something went wrong and it was taking a really long time. And with about a minute and a half on the clock, Brad Holmes calls James Gladstone and he's like, hey, do we have a deal? And it was a fair phone call because in each case, it's not just, I have 90 seconds to put the pick in. You have to call the player in question that you're drafting. And that's I don't know if people know this, but that's an NFL thing. Usually the cliche is to make sure they're not dead. That's a little over dramatic, but you've spent months and months and months. You have a lot invested in this. You want to hear the person's voice. It's not just for show, like, hey, you're going to be a Jaguar. It's like, hey, we want to know that you're like of sound being and, you didn't break your legs. So with a minute and a half,
Jeez.
Brad Holmes and James Gladstone are on the phone and one of them has to call, whichever player that guy's going to pick, get him on the phone and then get the pick in. So it could get kind of tense as the clock winds down.
God, it's fascinating.
And there was more. We'll have that for you. The conversation with Mike Silver being in a draft war room on draft day in the NFL when we come back. Hope you're enjoying this Friday best of edition of Dirt and Sprague. Swag here with you all the way up until 9 o'clock on 1080 The Fan.
Who's stinking it up?
Woo! Do not go in there.
It's time for Who's Stinking It Up, a sports lowlight that's ripped from the headlines.
We couldn't do diddly poo.
Brought to you by Three Mountains Home Services. Schedule your appointment online at threemountainshome services.com.
Yeah, rough night for me. I got to be better, setting the tone, getting downhill. I feel like I didn't do a great job of that. But I watched the film. There were some different things they did defensively. But for the most part, I think their base stuff was the same.
It was the same. Tyrese Halliburton looked like a guy who was waiting to close out a series at home. He no-showed. 8 points, just 7 shots, 2 rebounds, 5 free throws, as the Pacers will have to close out the Knicks at home in Game 6 if they want to get to the NBA Finals. Stinking it up. Well, it was the Pacers there in Game 5 at the Garden. It's brought to you by Three Mountains Home Services. Even though Brandon's out, he left town and asked our friends at Three Mountains for one more day to get and call and book that AC tune-up. Today or tomorrow, by May 31st, it'll be just $49. So tune up your AC and get ready for the summer at an incredible price. Book online at threemountainhomeservices.com. They make home services delightful.
Hey, everybody. Sprague here. My friends at
Let's go! Where Dirt and Sprague crunch the hot topics you want to hear.
What's the pressure? Don't sit here and act like there's no... We get nervous teeing off in front of a gallery on the 10th hole at Eastmoreland.
Crunch Time, brought to you by Crunch Fitness, with memberships as low as $9.99 per month. Find your Crunch Time in Portland, Vancouver, and online at crunch.com.
Yes, Crunch Time brought to you by Crunch Fitness, with memberships as low as $9.99 per month. Find your Crunch Time in Portland, Vancouver, and online at crunch.com. There is no more Crunch Time like the War Room on NFL Draft Day. Dirt and Sprague here on this Best Of edition. We continue their conversation they had with Mike Silver, longtime NFL reporter and author who was in the Jags War Room this past April.
You know, I make the joke about Gladstone in the way that, you know, he looks and how old he looks, but there is, I think, a thing that resonates with us. We started our radio careers very young, and a lot of people thought, oh, you know, mid-20s, nobody's going to take you seriously. That age thing is a part of it. I remember when Sean McVay was hired as the head coach originally of the Rams, and you're like, this guy's 32 years old? What the hell are they thinking? And now he looks like a genius. 30, that's 30. Right. Thank you. So yeah. Even younger than that. So there is an intrigue there of like, is this guy really is he a wonderkind? Is he like this boy genius who's coming up? As you watch him interact with other GMs, he's pulling out these phone calls. Just what are some of the traits and the things that stand out from experiencing such a young general manager that you just don't see very often in the NFL?
Well, so far I would say one thing that I've noticed with James Gladstone is he's not afraid to throw himself out there, which is going to cause some resentment in the ranks, I think, but also, he's got some swag to him. And so that's not always going to translate well. And we saw Shedeur Sanders, the swag obviously wasn't, super well received, which was regrettable. But in the case of Travis Hunter and James Gladstone, the swag was, applauded. So I don't know. I like the swag. I like that he, and he's doing it a little unconventionally. Like he tries to run his draft or to present his draft board more along the lines of a coach's call sheet with like kind of categories and little reminders and alerts. And he also had a little laminated mini card in his pocket of 31 guys that were kind of like the guys he really thought based on round and position that they wanted to pay special attention to. And 8 of the 9 guys they got were on that sheet. So by his standard, it went well. But I think, he's not a guy who's going to shy away from not just throwing it out there, but trying to be great. And that doesn't mean he'll always get the best players. And certainly you can get the roster you want and the ball bounces weird or, it's not coached well, whatever. But I think he's got a chance to make some noise. And I think more significant, the Jaguars have had this, horrific run. Urban Meyer obviously being the low point, but some really, really rough years, with 2 exceptions, since Shad Khan bought the team in 2011. And I think they have a chance now to try to craft it in a different way, and they're not being subtle about it. They're getting after it.
I want to ask you a Shedeur question, and I know that's probably something you've been asked about a lot. I know you covered the Jags draft. I am curious very quickly, though, Mike, like when you're in that room, maybe this is a tell-all book at the end of your career when you don't care anymore about people being mad at you. How often do these teams like audibly react to teams making questionable picks? Like, do you hear and feel teams like laughing? Are they gasping? Does that happen in the draft room?
I mean, it's happened. I'm trying to think back to this current draft. One interesting reaction in the Jags war room was they kind of in the middle of the round, some of the people, it wasn't a very populated room as draft rooms go. It was probably a dozen people, but a couple of people started talking about the Ravens and like, watch, they're just going to sit there and the perfect guy for the Ravens is going to fall to them right there. Like always, it's going to be right there on the board. Watch how they do this. They're the best. And like, sure enough, the safety is there at 27, and they're like, watch what happens. And sure enough, they turn in the card and they're like, classic Baltimore Ravens. They just got the best guy for them. So that was kind of cool just to see the admiration. And then interestingly, after the draft, I debriefed with Eric DaCosta, their great general manager, over text, and he hadn't read the story yet, but he kind of begrudgingly admitted that the Jags had snagged a couple of guys that he wanted too, which I don't think is normal. So that was kind of cool to hear his side of it. But yeah, no, certainly they react. And listen, I think the Shedeur thing, it's portrayed as this like, haha, the NFL taught him a lesson. But at least what I experienced via text and witnessing their draft room was, it didn't feel like that at all. It felt more like, yeah, it's not, we don't want it for us. It's not right. But like, damn, that poor kid. And when he did finally get off the board in the 5th round, I don't know if it was like flat out applause, but people seemed happy in the Jags war room. Like, okay, good. That poor kid finally, got on a team. So I do think it is overstated, this whole like, this guy, we're going to show him that, he's not, he's too cocky for the NFL. I think it's, some of it was some people didn't like his tape. There's other stuff out there, but I do think it's going to go down as a more regrettable chapter. And I think there was an awareness around the league that it was a bad look for the league overall. And, somebody had to step up and stop the bleeding.
Great stuff. What do you make of coaches' sons getting their organization and coach fired $250K and $100K? You ever seen that before?
No, I know Jeff Ulbrich really, really well. It's just, man, I'm really torn on this one because I really feel for Shedeur. I think he's a better kid than people realize. I know Jeff Ulbrich really well. I know what an idiot I was at 21, and I also am a huge fan of prank calls and have a long storied history, sometimes with NFL players, of doing prank calls. But that particular prank seemed, a little cruel in the moment. Putting it on the internet or putting it on social media is an interesting choice too. But that's a lot of money, man. And listen, I have a kid. One of my kids is in his mid-20s, and he's on the radio in San Francisco. So I totally get what you guys are saying. But if he ever did anything like that to me, can you imagine how many times he'd have to wash my car and other assorted things? That would be rough.
It was rough, but thanks again to Mike Silver for joining us with that fascinating story. We turn our attention to college sports in the final hour. Ducks and Beavers both hosting regionals. Joe Freeman will reprise that. And then our good buddy Josh Pate was called in live from West Virginia. We're less than 100 days from the kickoff of the college football season. That in hour 3, this best of edition, Dirt and Sprague on a Friday here on 1080 The Fan.
Hey, Dirt and Sprague hanging around here for Trajan Wealth, our good friends. Retirement is right around the corner. You hear us talk about it all the time. Are we properly planning for retirement?
Now, from the George McCoy at Warren Allen Sports Desk, a Sports Center update on 1080 The Fan.
First on The Fan, The Thunder still waiting for an opponent in the NBA Final after the Knicks controlled things wire to wire in Game 5 of the Eastern Conference Finals, taking down the Pacers 111-94. The series goes back to Indianapolis. Game 6 Saturday night. We'll have it for you here on The Fan. The NCAA baseball tournament gets going today. Regionals being held in both Corvallis and Eugene. Oregon State, the number 8 overall national seed, hosts WCC tournament champion St. Mary's. 5 o'clock first pitch on ESPN+. Over on 910 ESPN Portland, you will hear the 12th overall national seed Oregon Ducks taking on the WAC tournament champion Utah Valley. 6 p.m. first pitch. Our pregame coverage will start at 5:45. The Ducks softball team dropped their opener at the Women's College World Series. UCLA winning 4-2 on a walk-off 2-run home run. They're in the elimination bracket today against Ole Miss. 6:30 first pitch on ESPN. More sports scores and stories in 30 minutes. Jason Swigart from the George McCoy at Warren Allen Sports Desk. Hurt missing work. Insurance companies acting like jerks. Don't call your mom. Call George McCoy at warrenallen.com.
Jump back to earlier parts of your favorite fan shows on the Odyssey app. The only way to rewind Portland's sports leader, 1080 The Fan. It's time for Dirt.
Well, we're doing this. It's just Swag here on a Friday. The boys on vacation. Hope you're enjoying our best of edition here of Dirt and Sprague. A lot of Blazers, some NFL there in the first 2 hours, but right now we turn our attention to the college ranks. The NCAA baseball tournament getting underway today. Both the Ducks and Beavers hosting regionals. They are both national seeds. Can they both get to Omaha? We turn to friend of the show, the handsome one, Joe Freeman of the Oregonian, who explains just how that handsomeness comes about.
It's genes, brother. It's just all genes. Yeah. I don't do anything.
You a moisturizer guy? You don't lotion? You don't
beard oil.
You put anything in the beard? Is it just all natural?
No, you see the wives come out of the shower, get ready or whatever, and there's lotion and moisturizer going on, and I'm just like, what's going on there? I don't know what any of that stuff is, man. It's just,
You're the Ken Griffey Jr. of handsome men. You're doing it the natural way. Is that what you're telling me? No steroids here?
Yeah, so far so good. I can see the grays is starting to come, though. I think in probably the next 12 to 16 months that the handsome will evaporate.
Yeah, my brother-in-law said this is true for him. Is it true for you? Will we ever see Joe Freeman without a beard the rest of our lives?
Ooh,
wow. The beard's easy. It works. The wife loves it. Yep. So it probably not, but man, when it goes white or gray, who knows? Maybe that'll prompt me to make a change.
Just be a silver fox, man. You just evolve in life. That's what we do. Speaking of evolving, Oregon State goes independent this year. They played a lot of road games.
Nice transition.
Look, you like that? That was a Radio Pro move right there. And look at that top 8 seed for the Beavs. So hosting a regional, is this how we expected the year to go? And what do we make of the teams they're going to be taking on this weekend?
Well, I expected them to have a very good season, as we talked about, earlier, whenever that was, and but I wasn't so sure as it came down to crunch time because, they got swept by the Ducks. They had a couple bad series losses here and there, and you just never know with the selection committee what they decide to do. They were basically a bubble hosting team, and I think that panned out. They got the last, top 8 seed. They're number 8. So I guess it sort of unfolded how we expected. I kind of thought, I guess I was wrong. I thought they might just miss the cut. I thought they might kind of end up at 9. But they clearly rewarded their high RPI, which finished the season at 7. And a lot of that is because they played so many road games. They only played 19 home games this season. So when Mitch Canham, their coach, went out to kind of plot the schedule, leading up to the season, he put an emphasis and a priority on playing a lot of road games because he knew that would help their RPI, which they needed because, obviously they didn't have the Pac-12 conference to lean on anymore.
Well, they had that series with Oregon, Joe, and I know you covered it, but I'm just curious because it didn't end well for Oregon State fan who was quite outraged, Duck fan getting the last laugh from that one. But like after that, in a moment where maybe people are questioning them a little bit and saying, this isn't the year, they finished the season rather impressively. They beat Iowa. They took the series from Hawaii. They beat Long Beach State. Like they had a good finish to their regular season. What was their takeaway of losing that series to Oregon and kind of how they wrapped their season up after that series?
Yeah, they were pretty stunned by getting swept. They did not see that coming. And you talk to people who cover Oregon baseball very closely. They didn't see it coming either. Oregon kind of got real hot there, and they got real hot at the end of the year. I think they closed with like a 11-game winning streak before they fell in the Big Ten tournament. So no one really saw that coming, but they. It's a real gritty team, kind of, I guess, emboldened by what happened to the Pac-12, emboldened by their independent schedule and nature and buoyed by their talents, while other programs on campus kind of suffered a bit of a collapse or, saw players defect right and left across the country. Pretty much all the Beavers stayed, because of the program, because of Coach Mitch Canham, and because of the tradition and history there. But there was kind of a players' meeting after that fourth loss to the Ducks, and they all kind of had a little chat about what they needed to do, move forward, and kind of stay together, don't lose hope, that sort of stuff. And they rebounded. I think they went 9-1-1 in May or something like that, and so. It was a pretty impressive turnaround. Like you said, they wanted Iowa, they wanted Hawaii, and those kind of just righted the ship there and carried them to a nice little finish.
Yeah, we're talking with the handsome one, the bearded one, Joe Freeman, at Blazer Freeman on Twitter. You can give him a follow there, covering a lot of different things, including Oregon State baseball for the Oregonian. I chuckle at these kind of conversations. I don't know how much you have this back and forth with Beaver fans, but it's certainly out there on social media. Like when you replace a legend at a job, those are hard shoes to fill. And Oregon State's previous manager, was a legend who had multiple national championships. How much pressure is there on Canham in this regional, or if they advance super regional, to maybe quiet some of that noise? Is there no? I know he's not going to get fired, but just from the public perception of the fan base who's looking at this guy saying, "Hey, what have you done for us?" What do you make of that conversation?
Well, it's ridiculous that there would be any perceived heat on Mitch. He's coached number 6 or 7, wherever they ended up in the nation. Despite the collapse of their historic conference, he kept the entire roster together, which included, multiple MLB, draft prospects. The roster is loaded. He's built a really tight knit culture there for all the culture buzzword people. He's he's steeped in the tradition. He played there. He's a 2-time national champion. He's produced, I want to say, 2 super regional teams during his 5 years there. Well, 6. This is the 6th year, so 2. We'll see how this year goes. Every other team except for the COVID year made the regionals. There's been a lot of success. It's just the expectations of a program that wins has won 3 national championships, and they expect to win a championship every year. You talk to them. Some programs hide from expectations. Certainly, covering professional sports, it's not always that teams come out and say their goal is to win it all. The Beavers say that every year. So when they don't get to Omaha, they fail to meet their own expectations. But the fact of the matter is, only 8 teams go there. It takes one hot team to catch fire at the right time to sweep through a regional or a super regional, and that's just the way baseball is. So any heat on him. I don't believe there's any at all, and I think any notion that there is just from fans who have a warped perspective. It's an incredible program. That's the crown jewel of the athletics there, and they should appreciate the product they have, quite frankly.
They've reached a Feinbaum SEC college football territory, 10-2, and you're an absolute bum.
They won 41 games.
Yeah.
There's only 20 or so teams that have done that this year. So, they produced tons of major league draft picks under Coach Canham. By every measurable, whatever you want to call it, he's succeeded, minus getting to Omaha so far. And he's only been coached there for 6 years if you count COVID. So, it took Pat Casey how many years before he won a national championship and got to Omaha and won. So, it's just the nature of the sport.
Well, and then from second to third was also a pretty large gap. Still had a lot of success. It's just you don't win the title every year. I'm kind of curious about a couple things. The road thing was something I was wondering if Beaver Fan was taking more into account how many road games they had this year versus home because of the independent schedule. I would say based on some of the social media, and we shouldn't allow that to be the norm, that noise didn't seem to take into account that part of it. One of the road games that we mentioned was in Eugene. I know you didn't cover everything Oregon this year, but from what you saw and what you were kind of keeping up with the Ducks, did they look like a team that's finally going to kind of break their Omaha drought this year? Do you pick Oregon to what that situation could be and trying to win their regional, advance to a super, and get to Omaha for the first time? Just the season that you saw them have from afar and what you saw up close.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I had questions about the depth of their pitching and their bullpen. They quieted some of that down the stretch when they got hot, but I still think some of that lingers. They play in a very hitter-friendly park. The fences are in, so you see their home run totals, and you think, wow, they have a lot of boppers. Mason Neville leads college baseball in home runs, and he certainly is a talented player. So is Jacob Walsh, and they've got some really nice middle infielders as well. They have a very good team. I don't know. It will be interesting to see if they have the depth of pitching. Grayson Grinsell is he's a solid ace. He had a bad outing against Nebraska, and you see if he doesn't bring in, he doesn't set the tone, it's very difficult for them in a series. So, and especially in a regional, when anything you hit the loser's bracket or something goes awry, you need that pitching depth. And so that would be the one thing that would, give me pause about them making a run. But, that's another team that's got real solid culture under Waz there, that their coach, and they've got a lot of talent. So they certainly have the capability to do it. It's just, it's a stupid thing to say. It's horrible analysis, but baseball is just all about who is hot at the right time. The Oregon State 2022 Oregon State team was so good all year, and they came within one run of getting to Omaha just because they ran into an Auburn team that was just playing remarkably hot at that moment, and that's just the way. We saw it with Oregon State in 2007, I think it was.
Yep.
They barely made it into the tournament. They caught fire and won it all again. So it's the nature of the sport.
Joe Freeman will be in. Corvallis Beavs at 5 today against St. Mary's. Then the Ducks in Eugene, 6 o'clock against Utah Valley. You'll hear that over on 910 ESPN Portland. All the games all weekend for the Ducks will be on 910. When we come back, kickoff times were released for half the Ducks football schedule in 2025. The guys had this week earlier. Bill Connolly, the SP Plus model is out. Just where do the Ducks look to finish? Is another college football playoff appearance in their future? We'll reprise that for you. Dirt and Sprague, best of edition on a Friday here on 1080 The Fan.
It's back. Your local Toyota.
Swag back here with you on this best of edition on a Friday as the guys enjoy a day off. Sprague will be back on Monday, and Bill Oram from the Oregonian going to sit in with him for a couple of days. Dirt will be back on Thursday, and they were both excited to see after the show yesterday, the Ducks released half of the kickoff times for their upcoming schedule. And now the question really focuses in, without a proven quarterback ready to go for Dan Lanning, just how good could the 2025 Ducks football team be? So they turned to good friend Bill Connolly of ESPN.com, the SP Plus model. Where will the Ducks be?
I don't know which team we're talking about right now, but I'm very, very, very curious about Oregon, if we're being honest here. I'm just going to jump right in.
Jump right in. You do it, Bill. You go for it.
Jump in that pool, Dan Lanning. Let's go. Bill, I got a question on Oregon, okay? Because I'm also curious. I give them the respect. I think the defense is probably going to be pretty good. I think that offense is geared to make life easy on the quarterback, right? Like, people gave Bo Nix these check down Charlie things the year he goes to the Heisman, but like it worked. It was exactly what their offense needed, and he hit on the deep ball. We no longer have 26-year-old quarterbacks at the helm here, and I don't know what to make of Dante Moore. Is that your question mark as well, the quarterback position?
Yeah, I mean, basically, when I was walking through their lineup, and I mean, before we go any further, Oregon's projected 7th. They're like 2 points out of the top 4. So, I mean, it's not like, I don't actually hate your team, basically, is what I'm saying. But when I was walking through their lineup and piecing it all together, there just weren't nearly as many, like, proven entities as I expected to see. Like, in my head, as Oregon entered the offseason, I mean, you're going to be relying on at least a couple offensive line transfers, potentially very good ones. I mean, all conference at their last stop and whatnot. That's fine. I love Mekhi Hughes. I think that's going to be just fine at running back. But yeah, I mean, we don't really know what the quarterback position is going to bring. We don't really know how much help Evan Stewart has in the receiving core and the defense. I agree. I'm just going to assume the defense is fine. But I mean, 4 of last year's top 5 defensive tackles are gone. Safety's brand new, or secondary is brand new. Mm-hmm. So I mean, yeah, there are a lot more questions to answer than I kind of realized until I put the roster together.
Damn, dude, he hates your team.
He hates my team.
He hates your
Nobody's
team.
given us a chance this year, according to Bill. Only 7th, the disrespect. God,
5 and 7 on the
way. Let me ask you this, though, because I was reading through this, and I just love looking ahead to next season. And there was a compelling opinion out there, or a thought out there in college football last year, that Ohio State was a bit of a last of a dying breed. Like, they recruited at such an elite level. They brought in a transfer quarterback. And then, oh, by the way, they had everybody that potentially could have gone to the NFL essentially returned for another year, and they brought everybody back for one more run, and they kind of had that super team vibe. Now, they didn't show it for a large chunk of the regular season, especially in the Michigan game, until the playoffs. Is when you're looking at the teams this year and kind of like stacking them up, Ohio State I know is number 1. You got Bama. It's all the usual suspects. Is that a opinion that you agree with going from last year to this year, that it doesn't look like one team is necessarily head and shoulders above everybody else?
Yeah, I mean, last year we headed in with Ohio State and I would say Ole Miss both kind of going all in different ways. Obviously, Ole Miss brought a lot more in the portal, but both of those teams seemed like they were spending a lot to put that roster together, and it paid off for both of them in different ways. They were the top 2 teams at SP Plus. Ole Miss managed to blow a couple games they couldn't blow, managed to little jams they couldn't wriggle their way out of, and they missed the playoff just barely. But if they'd made it, they could have been dynamite in the playoff as well. And Ohio State obviously had one mulligan to spare and used it, and then suddenly peaked at the right time. But I think, yeah, we're in a situation. We were in it last year, and we're in it again this year, where you look at the projected ratings. Ohio State's 1.5 points ahead of number 2 Alabama. That's fine, but it's not like 5 points, and they're not in the mid-30s in these ratings. You got the top 9 all separated by basically a touchdown, and then the next like 10 or 12 are basically separated by a touchdown. So it's there's a lot of uncertainty baked in here, and I do think that's an area where, the teams that have recruited the most consistently awesome in recent years, which are probably Ohio State, Alabama, and Georgia still, they're at the top of the ratings, but they're not really far ahead of a lot of other teams that have managed to, maybe close the gap a little bit by using the portal just right or whatever. There are a lot more tools at your disposal if you're trying to build a good team right now. And it's really, really fun, even if, we didn't get any evidence last year that the very most talented teams aren't still going to win the whole thing.
Yeah, Bill, I got Toledo, Mississippi State, Maryland, Liberty, Navy, Army, Cincy, Cal, Michigan State, UTSA are all ahead of Oregon State, who come in 73rd, way down there in the SP Plus, our Beavers. I am curious, though. I know you don't focus in on Oregon State as much as you do some of these other schools, but when you go through this, is there any takeaways going into the second year of Trent Bray? I know they got Malik Murphy. That was a big addition for them in the portal. They are returning some offensive talent. Defensively, I know that they hope that they can take a step. When you look at Oregon State, I guess, how much has it changed since Jonathan Smith last year to where it's at going into year 2 with Trent Bray?
Yeah, first of all, how dare you? My focus on Oregon State is always very strong.
It is. That's true. I give you that credit.
I think I think the biggest takeaway with that projected number 73 ranking is they were 97th last year. They kind of fell apart, especially on defense. The efficiency was still there. They could still run the ball pretty well, but passing was iffy. Defense was beyond iffy. So the fact that they're, the components are projecting them to improve by quite a bit, I do think that means something. And part of that is that, Malik Murphy does bring some, he threw for 2,900 yards last year. Didn't love Duke's offense, if we're being honest. And I think he's a better runner than he was asked to be in the Duke offense, especially. He ran like 7 times all year, not including sacks. But I'm curious. He's going to have a really, really experienced receiving core at his disposal. Hankerson's good. Does feel like the offense could rebound if the offensive line holds up at least. Defense, that's going to tell the tale. There's what, like 2 probably. Well, I was going to say unwinnable. Texas Tech is not unwinnable, but they're going to be, 2 touchdown projected underdogs in that game. Outside of Tech and Oregon, they're projected favorites or toss-ups in every single game on the schedule. So if you're ready to overachieve in some of the transfers hit on defense, then I think the ceiling's still pretty high for this team. I feel a little better about Oregon State than Washington State this year just because of the spectacular amount of change at Wazoo. I love basically making them, South Dakota State West, but I assume that translation's going to take a little while.
Look at that, Dirt. We're 2 10-2 programs.
Look at us. We could win 10 games. You guys might win another conference championship this year.
Yeah, right,
we both
will.
Pac-2 champs and Big Ten champs on this show. Bill Connolly is our guest. The S&P Plus model on ESPN. It's all free and available for everybody to read. He tweeted it out as well at ESPN_Bill C, ranking all the teams as a kind of spring wrap-up in college football. I'm curious about the Huskies this year. Bill, they had a up and down year, obviously, with Jed Fish in year 1. It was one where I'm sure Husky fan would argue could have been even better if they don't call a speed option to the short side of the field at the goal line against the Cougs. They come in at number 39. I was interested in the offensive rating there. I think they're 52nd, which they got a quarterback who they're pretty high on. They're returning their top wide receiver. Jonah Coleman's back for another year. What do you make of the Huskies, and is this a pop kind of year for them? Is there potential there for them to have a better season?
Yeah, the passing game was, run and pass. The big plays kind of vanished from 2 years ago. And that ended up being kind of a major issue because, obviously with Coleman, you're going to run the ball pretty well. But yeah, I'm curious about the big plays, and whether the receiving court, like guys like Omari Evans coming in from Penn State, he was really good when he caught the ball, but he caught 21 passes all year, averaged like 20 yards a catch and then, couldn't get open against good opponents. So curious how they scheme that and everything. But I kind of give Jed Fish the benefit of the doubt here. It took him a year at Arizona to really kind of click into place. But once he had what he needed, everything obviously clicked pretty well. Coordinator changes. We'll see how that all works. And obviously there are a ton of transfers on defense. But I do think, if the big play capabilities come back a little bit, whether it's because of Evans or just better familiarity among all the personnel, then, it's kind of like Oregon State. There are like 2 or 3 games on the schedule that are, you're going to be pretty solid underdogs in, but everything else is on the table outside of Ohio State, Michigan, and Oregon. It's going to be projected favorites in all the other games, maybe.
What do you make of the Sankey new playoff model noise? I know that's not necessarily up your avenue at all times, but it feels very loud right now. Sankey saying it's not his obligation to look after the game, just the SEC. Clearly the SEC and Big Ten are trying to take up all the playoff spots. What is Bill Connolly's takeaway of how this is like kind of killing the sport that we love so much but we're all going to tune in and watch because we're sickos and we love it.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I never had to pay a single attention to a single word Greg Sankey or any of the other conference commissioners ever had to say again. I wish there was somebody actually in charge of the sport, so I didn't. So, because these are all propaganda arms. They are indeed. If Greg Sankey doesn't act in the interest of his presidents every single day, he'll get fired. So of course, like he has to say these things and do these things. I get it, but the system as a whole just stinks because they're the most powerful conferences, they do run the sport, and we could the last couple of weeks have been extremely disillusioning. As we kind of move towards 16 teams, I was hoping maybe they could be shamed out of the auto bids thing, and Greg Sankey certainly doesn't seem like he's really into the auto bids, but we still hear all these ideas about like double buys and this and that. Like, oh my God, it's 16 teams. There's a reason. Like every sport has a 16-team playoff. It's clean. It's easy. Just pick the number of conference champions you want, seed everybody else, and let's go. But the constant jockeying and politicking and everything just stinks, and I hate that it matters. There should be somebody outside of this group in charge of the sport and making these calls, and of course that's never been the case with college football.
All right, last one for you, Bill. Every year we have one of these teams that starts in near the top of the list, and then they fade or sink like a stone. The numbers spit it out. They give you the top 10. Who's the most fraudulent team in your S&P Plus top 10 right now?
I was a huge Ole Miss advocate last year, and I thought, if they had sneaked into the playoff, they really could have done a lot of damage. I don't like this transfer haul at all. Like the reason they're projected, I think, 9th is because they were 2nd last year. Like Lane Kiffin, we probably do not give him enough credit for how well he has done these last few years at Ole Miss. But then I just look at, maybe Austin Simmons is kind of ready to be a stud at quarterback, but I just look at the guys they lost and the guys they brought in, and feels like it's a downgrade just about everywhere. So that one's kind of tough for me to I guess they're 11th, actually. Never mind.
They're right there. They're right outside the top 10. That's fair.
That's right. I didn't pick a top 10 team. No, Ole Miss at 11. Michigan at 10 feels pretty ambitious, too, although we know that all they need is kind of a semi-competent quarterback, and they could be in pretty good shape. But, yeah, those two are pretty tough. Otherwise, I think it was a pretty logical list for the most part. Even if you don't believe Alabama at number 2, I know why it says that on paper. So, yeah, I had to go down to number 10 and 11 to find some genuine question marks.
I'm not a big betting man on the futures, but if I was, and I'm that. There's some Clemson tasty ticket stuff there. I think they are set up right now, I think, to have a really special season and maybe be in that top, 2-3 ranking at the end of the season.
I sort of agree. I agree that if they're ever going to do that, it's this year. But I'm still, like, from a number standpoint, they're a little further down than they're going to be in the polls. And I think the major reason for that is we're using this tiny sample of like 3 deep passes against Texas as a reason to suddenly believe that they're going to make big plays again when it's been like 5 years since they did. So that's kind of my one concern is it's like an old school bowl bump for Clemson in a way, even though they lost. And we'll see if they're capable of it. We're going to see it this year, but I'm not buying in all the way yet.
You can check out Bill Connolly's SP Plus model at ESPN.com. The Ducks will open the season at home against Montana State on August the 30th right here on The Fan. When we come back, the guys were able to track down Josh Pate on the road, West Virginia University, talking to him from midfield. What will college football look like in the years to come? That's how we will wrap things up. But first, sort of a update.
Now, from the George McCoy at Warren Allen Sports Desk, a Sports Center update on 1080 The Fan.
Brought to you by Vulcan Design and Construction. Check out their award-winning outdoor living designs or schedule your free design consultation at vulcandc.com. First on The Fan, the LPGA Tour with its second major of the year playing Erin Hills in Wisconsin. Mao Saigo of Japan has taken the lead here in the second round, 5 under par. Andrea Lee, Yulimi No, the Americans that are up there at 4 under, along with Alim Kim, former winner. Lottie Wood, the top-ranked amateur in the world, at 3 under par. Nelly Korda, after a tough day on the first round, 2 under through 9 today. And the All-American from the University of Oregon, Kiara Romero, did is in position to make the cut. +1 will tee off at 11:25 this morning. More sports scores and stories in 30 minutes. Jason Swigard from the George McCoy at Warren Allen Sports Desk. Hurt, missing work. Insurance companies acting like jerks. Don't call your mom. Call George McCoy at warrenallen.com.
It's back. The 11th. and Sprague on 1080 The Fan.
Swag back here with you, closing things down on this best of edition for a Friday as the guys enjoy a little vacation time. But we were excited to track down not that long ago our good friend Josh Pate, the commissioner, college football, his show on YouTube, College Football with Josh Pate, on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Sundays. And we tracked him down in maybe a more, hadn't done an interview from there before, midfield on the logo of Mountaineer Stadium on the campus of West Virginia.
Not only am I'm standing on the aforementioned, I don't know what the WVA logo is, the WVU logo. I'm standing on it. It's just me and maybe a wayward concession worker somewhere around here. I heard an echo a second ago, but as far as I know, I'm all alone in here, just trespassing.
Hey, Pate, what is your 40 time you think? Like, what do you think you would run a 40 in?
Look, here's how I choose to answer that question on this show. If our lives depended on it, out of the three of us, I wouldn't be the one who died.
Yeah, that's fair. I would be the one that died. That's okay. I know. Look, we all have to know our strengths and weaknesses, you know?
I got in a big argument with a guy because to me, I believe I can run a sub 5 second 40 still. I'm 39 years old. I feel like I can run sub 5 seconds. And he said, you're crazy. You don't get how fast sub 5-second 40 is. And I said, well, then I bet him an uncomfortable amount of money on it. And then I thought better of it, and we did not end up running. But honestly, I have no idea what it would be.
Yeah, you got to watch those quads, man. They don't quite burn the way that they used to. So I'm curious to see what Pate's 40 time could be. Let me ask you this out of the weekend. I know you were tweeting a lot about it. What gets Josh Pate in the current landscape of college football to go full Mel Kiper and just melt down? There's a lot you could probably choose from because everybody has, their gripes about the current landscape of the sport. What gets you to pull a full Mel Kiper?
So a couple of things just in the last week. I don't like that the same people who trash kids for chasing NIL bags are also trashing kids like Quinn Ewers for turning one down to go chase the NFL. That makes no sense to me because there's a lot of hypocrisy there. I do not like that there is not – how do I put this? I don't like how little legacy is valued anymore. So I'm in West Virginia today. I was just in Ren Baker's office 2 minutes ago. Well, like 20 minutes ago. That's the AD at West Virginia. And I was talking to him about this. And it used to be that the word legacy really meant a lot to people. And I don't know that people think about it so much anymore. But it still matters. So I want you guys to think like if I'm enrolled at Texas or I'm enrolled at Oregon or whatnot, if I'm there 4 years, think about how much more rare that is now and how much more valuable that would be for me 20 or 30 years from now than at any point in history. It used to be everyone pretty much stayed at one program. So if you went and spoke publicly 30 years from now at a charity event down in Bend, Oregon or Denton, Texas, well, big deal. You played 4 years there. So did everyone. Well, now fast forward to 2050. And imagine being able to say, yeah, I played all 4 years of my college football career at one place. Think about how marketable that makes you. Think about how much more value that bakes in, and think about the respect factor. And also think about how much personal pride you take in knowing where you're from. Just a question as simple as, hey, where'd you go to school? It'll take some guys 2 minutes to answer that down the road. So just the legacy, I think legacy, and then also prioritization. That's what gets me worked up a little bit. I don't know if I'm going to mock draft them to go in the 5th round, but those two things are what get me worked up right now.
Well, I think that's the thing. We were talking about this earlier because you did a good job on the show yesterday because I know NFL's not really your thing. My only counter to that is if you ever fight yourself on what to do and how to do the show is – I actually would tell you as a listener of your program now for God knows how many years and a friend of the show, I actually would look forward to hearing your thoughts. Maybe not on team fit because whatever, the NFL is the NFL, but Quinn Ewers deciding to leave, Shador falling to the 5th, other guys that you watched and you loved or you thought were really good falling to a certain round. I'm genuinely interested in that because you may not provide the NFL part of it that people look for, but you have enough of the college smarts to help me kind of maybe mesh those together. So as a listener and viewer, I would tell you that I do enjoy your content. The legacy thing is interesting to me. We talked about this earlier, the Quinn Ewers example, because he started for, 3 years at Texas. I get where you're coming from, but I just don't think the collective world where that matters anymore. And, yeah, you're right. The 4-year guy could maybe parlay that into stuff down the road. But also if Cam Ward hits, I promise you Miami fans and future Miami teams will hear from Cam Ward in a Miami polo as if he played there for 3 or 4 years because he's a good NFL quarterback.
Yeah, but you're pointing out the onion ring mixed in with the group of fries that I was talking about on the show last night. You're talking about an exception to the rule. I mean, look, if you can pull off a Cam Ward, more power to you. Transfer 1,000,000 times for all I care. But the 99% out there are not going to be him. And the 99%, that legacy will matter very much down the road. And it could be over the span of decades, the difference in millions of dollars of earnings, but also put money aside. I know that's a really weird thing to say nowadays, but put the money aside for a second. And just, I don't know, maybe I'm alone on this, but just personal pride factor in a legacy matters to me. But then the other part, for all the criticism that a lot of people give about the current structure or what is or isn't happening, you asked me a second ago what bothers me. Well, let me add a third thing on that. What bothers me is the disproportionate amount of the criticism that the kids have to bear the brunt of. when they didn't build the system. They probably, truth be told, don't even love the system, but they live in the system. They don't get like an alternate universe. There's not a button they press and they go to another world with another set of rules. So I don't know. I thought we got off of gripes, but I've merged our way back onto another one. But yeah, I'm told though that we're going to snap our fingers and all of that's going to rectify itself over the next couple of years. So we'll be good. We'll be fine.
It's all going to be fixed. Don't worry. There's great leadership in place. Everything's going in the right direction. Josh Pate is our guest, the commissioner of college football. You can catch his show every Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday, live on YouTube, 5 o'clock our time, at Josh Pate CFB on Twitter. Catch the podcast wherever you find your podcasts. Am I a weirdo for loving spring football? We're going to have their spring game on Saturday. I watched every second of it. Might have watched it twice. Am I weird for loving spring football?
No, you're a wonderful person for loving football. You're a patriotic American for loving spring football. I would ask the group of weirdos that's hating on you, what do you got going on in your life?
Thank you.
What's happening in your life?
Thank you.
Hand up.
And
Hand up,
let
Pate.
me,
Hand up.
can I just, okay, we have a hand.
Yeah, there's
Thank
a
you
hand.
for being brave enough. Thank you for being brave enough to admit your treachery. So now I would like to ask, why can't you just leave the rest of us alone and let us enjoy what we enjoy? How come you got to try and litigate your personal preferences onto us? Okay, we know our truth over here. We love spring football.
So
is it unhealthy? Of course it's unhealthy. Are we drawing conclusions that we'll forget by August? Absolutely.
Yes, damn
but
it.
you know what? That's the way the founders intended this country to operate.
Yeah, famously, that's what Thomas
Preach.
Jefferson put.
It was in the Constitution. Spring football means more.
Here's the thing. I will tell you, I am one of those weirdos you speak of. I am also one of those weirdos that doesn't care about spring ball. I don't need your takeaway that Kenyon Sadiq had 9 catches against his own team and probably wore a red jersey, so he couldn't be tackled. But I will also watch Josh Pate every day he's on.
There's no off season.
And I'll hear what's going on, but I don't need to watch it because God knows that's not the real football. The real football starts in July, in August, fall camp, week 0. That's the real stuff, baby. Give me the NBA playoffs. Give me some NHL every once in a while. I'll follow my Braves. And then I'll just listen to what Josh Pate tells me about college.
Wait. Can I ask one question though?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
And this is, I know we're all about humor on this show, but I just have one serious question if I can.
Okay.
What is the NBA?
That's well played.
I think we need to hang the phone up now.
That's well played.
I think we have reached
We got a
the point of this
basketball guy over here,
relationship.
Pate. We got a basketball guy. I'm over here watching spring football on
The NBA
Saturdays.
playoffs are elite, Pate. The NBA playoffs are good. You don't have to like the regular season. The playoffs are good.
I'm going to take your word for it. I've never heard of her, but I'm going to take your word for it.
We're all weirdos in different ways.
Well, the weirdos will finish up their conversation with Josh Pate. That's how we'll close out. Final thoughts as the college football season less than 100 days away here as we wrap up this best of edition on a Friday. Dirt and Sprague on 1080 The Fan.
Hey, everybody. Sprague.
This is Dirt and Sprague on 1080 The Fan.
Swag back here with you, wrapping it up on a Friday, this best of edition. More fun and hijinks here as we continue our conversation with friend of the show. He is the commish of college football, Josh Pate.
I love it. I'm curious on this. I'm assuming that you had a few more important things like traveling and, prepping your show going on than to sit around and watch the Oregon Spring game on Saturday. But I'm just curious from the national perspective. I've already seen, all these post-spring top 25s. Gotta love those. I read every single one of them because I'm a sicko. And they're, top 5, top 6. First time in a while that Oregon has had, and you could maybe go back to Lanning's first year with Bo, but at least Bo had played a lot of snaps at Auburn. But they have an unproven quarterback, and it's an open battle. Both guys had moments this weekend where it's a spring game, right? Offensive line's going to be a bit rough because you're breaking the unit up into two different teams. I'm just curious what you make from the national perspective on Oregon having another program record in NFL draft picks, but again having very high expectations for this upcoming year, yet this time without an experienced quarterback.
I think if you're doing spring takeaways, you're talking a lot more about portal than you are what you saw in the spring game, just in all seriousness. You would have had to have attended spring practices, which are closed, to have real takeaways from a football standpoint. But what you can know is Oregon went and overhauled their offensive line. Okay, that's wonderful. They went and got a running back out of Tulane that I think will be a 1,000-yard guy this fall if he's not hurt. That's wonderful. They probably got an all Big Ten caliber safety out of Purdue. That's wonderful. Those are to me the big takeaways about Oregon. And what's so crazy is what just happened to them in the draft and Ohio State. What just happened to them in the draft should decimate a normal program.
Yeah.
And instead, they're going to sit there and be expected to compete for the Big Ten title and a prime playoff spot again. And I think it's valid. I don't think that's unfounded expectation. But the Dante Moore thing, look, I'll just remind you guys, a former certain unnamed, very high-profile quarterback prospect enrolled and then transferred out of Oregon within 5 minutes a couple of months ago. And he did that because he saw Dante Moore practice. I'm just letting you know. Most people up there know I know that. But Dante Moore was good enough to scare away a 5-star caliber kid that just committed there. So I have a sneaking suspicion Oregon's going to be okay at quarterback. You make that my bold prediction for this year. Oregon, okay at quarterback.
What has been the fallout, just talking to people off the record, on the record, what have you, what has been kind of the takeaway of where or what this world has been and is when you have the Nico story happen and then, quietly happening in the spring that I don't think has really been brought up by many people. Hey, Jaden Rashada is playing at Sacramento State now. Like, what has been kind of the fallout from some of these high-level quarterbacks or just this kind of movement we're seeing in the sport, the way that it's transpired?
I was in the office of a head coach in the last couple of weeks. He put it very bluntly, but probably accurately. He said, the next multi-million-dollar payday either one of those guys will have, Rashada or Iamaleava, the rest of their careers will be if Netflix drops a bag in their lap to participate in an all-telling documentary down the road about how you derail a career. Wow. Because that's kind of what's happened to both of them. It's not that I wish it, but I don't have to wish it. It's happening anyway. The Nico stuff, I think far more than the Rashada stuff, has really jolted the sport into a course correction. And it's not isolated. There's a lot of other stuff going on in conjunction with it. But I've never seen sort of a coalescing of programs, coaches that normally are enemies, they're competing against each other, sort of come together and say, yeah, we gotta get control of this thing again. It's just whatever's got to happen. If Congress has got to get involved, if we got to make them employees, whatever, it is time for action. And I know we've been saying that for a long time, but we don't control things. But the ones who do have their arms within reach of the power levers in this sport and beyond, I think are motivated to change things now.
Interesting. Where's the next stop? So you're in West Virginia right now. I'm assuming that content will be out soon for the Coach Speaking Spring Tour. I did, look, I watched the USC stuff, the propaganda from Lincoln Riley, a little bit heavy, a little bit hot. That's all right.
I did that for you.
Thank you.
I did that for me. I did that for you.
I was one of those people at home. Yeah, this is the year the defense turns around. Where's the next stop? You got anything else planned? And will there be a trip to Eugene, Oregon at any point?
Yeah, we're planning the Oregon trip. It's not this week. I am told that I'll make a stop in the Buckeye State this week, and I will make a stop in the Yellowhammer State this week. I know you know what the Buckeye State is. Do you know what the Yellowhammer State is?
The Yellowhammer State? I don't know if I know that.
I thought you were a sicko like him.
I'm not on that level. I'm not commissioner level.
You sound like WVA.
I'm a deputy commissioner. What is the Yellowhammer State?
Well, anyone who's watching spring games would know that is the state of Alabama. So, look, it's like halftime for you guys. Let's finish the second half strong up there.
Well, we'll catch up with Josh when he makes his way to Eugene. Hope you enjoyed this best of edition of Dirt and Sprague. Dirt will be back with Bill Oram on Monday. Have a great weekend. We'll see you then. So long.